She woke up next to a stranger, not just any stranger, the most powerful man in Chicago, a billionaire whose name could silence a boardroom with a single glance. Lily Bennett, $29 left in her checking account, 3-day-old mascara smeared down her cheeks, had somehow stumbled into the wrong suite, the wrong bed, and the wrong life entirely. He was already awake, watching her. And the worst part, he wasn't angry. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit like and follow along, because this one's going to break you wide open. The elevator smelled like expensive cologne and stale champagne, and Lily Bennett was doing that thing she always did when she was drunk, convincing herself she was completely fine. She wasn't fine. She was exhausted in the specific grinding way that only comes from 3 days of running yourself into the ground for people who don't know your last name. Her heels were in her left hand. The keycard was in her right. The hallway of the 24th floor stretched ahead of her like something out of a fever dream. Long, gold-lit, identical doors repeating in both directions until they blurred. 2414, she muttered to herself. 2414. She'd been saying it like a mantra since the elevator. Room 2414. Her room. The modest company-booked room with the slightly scratchy comforter and the bathroom that smelled faintly of lavender cleaning solution. Her room, her bed, her safe place to collapse and be invisible for 8 hours before she had to be useful to someone again. The hallway tilted slightly. Lily pressed her free hand against the wall and steadied herself, closing her eyes for a moment. The open bar at the conference gala had been a mistake. She'd known that even as she accepted the third glass of Pinot Grigio from a passing server. But Marcus Holt, her supervisor, her technically competent but entirely useless supervisor, had been loudly taking credit for the seating arrangement she'd spent 14 hours designing, and she'd needed something to do with her hands besides put them around his neck. 3 glasses of wine. That was all. She wasn't a mess. She was a professional having a reasonable human reaction to an unreasonable situation. She found the door with the brass numbers, 2412. Close enough? Next one. She stopped in front of 2414, pressed the keycard to the reader, and watched the little light blink green. Good. Green meant home. The room was dark. Heavy curtains blocked the city lights completely. She could see almost nothing, just the faint outline of furniture, the soft ambient glow of a smoke detector on the ceiling, the enormous shadow of what was clearly a much nicer bed than the one she'd left that morning. Lily dropped her heels on the carpet. She set her clutch on what she thought was a desk. It was actually the edge of an armchair, and listened to it slide and thud to the floor without the energy to care. She unzipped the back of her dress just enough to breathe properly, crawled onto the bed, and pulled the covers up to her chin. The sheets were different, softer, heavier. Upgraded my room, she thought vaguely. That doesn't make sense. When did they... She was asleep before the thought finished. The first thing Lily heard when she woke up was breathing that wasn't hers. She didn't move. Her brain, still foggy and slow, tried to process the information before her body did. She was in a bed. The bed was large. The breathing was slow and steady and coming from somewhere approximately 14 inches to her left. She opened one eye. The curtains had shifted slightly, or maybe the city outside had brightened, and there was just enough gray morning light filtering through the edges to show her the shape beside her. A man. Dark hair against a white pillow, broad shoulders, one arm folded across his chest. Lily's heart stopped. Then it started again at approximately twice the normal speed. She sat up so fast she nearly toppled off the mattress, grabbing the headboard with both hands and staring at him with the concentrated terror of someone who has just realized the cliff they thought was a curb is, in fact, a cliff. The man stirred. Dark eyes opened. Found her immediately. Didn't blink. He looked at her the way people look at things they haven't decided how to categorize yet. Calm, considering, completely still. Lily's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Good morning," he said. His voice was low and unhurried, like he'd woken up to find strange women in his bed before and had simply developed a protocol for it. Lily's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I think I'm in the wrong room." He sat up slowly, pushing the covers back, and she registered several things in rapid succession. He was wearing a white t-shirt. He was large in the way that suggested a gym routine taken very seriously, and he was looking at her with an expression that was somehow simultaneously confused, annoyed, and this was the part that didn't make sense, almost amused. "The wrong room," he repeated. "The key card worked." She held it up, as if that explained everything. "I pressed it and the light went green. I swear I didn't—" "What's your room number?" 2414. He looked at the door, then back at her. "This is 2416. Lily stared at the door. Then she pressed both palms against her face and made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "The key cards for these suites have a manufacturing defect," he said, like he was dictating a memo. "I've had them recalibrate 3 times. They sometimes open adjacent rooms. I should have put the deadbolt on." "I am so sorry." She pulled her hands from her face. Her mascara was definitely destroyed. Her dress was half unzipped in the back. Her shoes were somewhere on his floor. "I am genuinely, completely, sincerely—" "Stop." She stopped. He studied her for a moment. The annoyance on his face shifted into something she couldn't read. "How much did you have to drink last night?" "That's—" She bristled despite herself. "That's not relevant." "It's slightly relevant, given you walked into the wrong suite and slept in my bed. 3 glasses of wine. I'm not some kind of—" She pushed her hair out of her face. "I work for the conference. I've been awake for almost 70 hours. I made a mistake with the room number. I'm leaving." She swung her legs off the bed, stood up, and immediately wobbled. Not from the wine, that was long out of her system, just from standing up too fast on 3 hours of sleep. His hand caught her elbow. She hadn't even seen him move. "Sit down for a second." "I'm fine." "You're swaying." She looked at the hand on her elbow, then at his face. Up close, he was younger than she'd initially processed. Early 30s, maybe. Jaw that needed a shave, dark circles under his eyes that suggested she wasn't the only one in this room running on nothing. "I'm fine," she said again more quietly. He let go, stepped back, gave her space. She collected her shoes from the floor, found her clutch under the armchair. One of the clasps had broken in the fall. Of course it had. She straightened up and looked at him one more time. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Really, I'm mortified." "Don't be. You're being very calm about this." "Would you prefer I wasn't?" She didn't answer that. She went to the door, pulled it open, and stepped into the hallway. Her own room was one door to the left. She stood in front of it for a moment, keycard in hand, breathing in the cold corridor air. Then she turned back to look at the door she'd just come through. 2416. She pressed her keycard to her own reader. The light blinked green. Of course it does, she thought. Of course it opens 2 rooms. She went inside, sat on the edge of her inferior bed, pressed her face into her hands, and then against her will started laughing. The helpless, exhausted, what is my life kind of laughing that's basically just crying wearing a different hat. She didn't find out his name until 3 hours later. The conference breakfast was held in the hotel's main ballroom, and Lily arrived showered and remascaraed and wearing her most professional blazer, determined to be a person again. She had 4 items on her morning agenda, a fresh legal pad, and the kind of headache that responds to hydration and black coffee and absolutely nothing else. She was filling her coffee cup at the station near the back of the room when she heard his name. Calloway just walked in, which means the morning panel is actually going to start on time for once. She turned. He was across the room. Tailored charcoal suit, no tie. Someone was immediately at his side, handing him a phone, and he took it without looking away from whatever conversation he was already having. Lily's coffee cup overflowed. She grabbed a napkin, pressed it against the spill, kept her eyes forward. Ethan Calloway. She knew the name the way everyone in this industry knew the name, from press coverage and conference programs and the kind of odd, slightly fearful whispers that follow certain men into rooms. Calloway Holdings. Real estate development, private equity, something in green technology she'd never fully understood. More money than most people could conceptualize. She'd slept in his bed. She'd wobbled in front of him like a baby deer. She'd told him 3 glasses of wine wasn't relevant. Lily folded the wet napkin very carefully and placed it on the table and thought, I need to be extremely busy for the rest of this conference and never make eye contact with anyone over 5'10". She lasted until noon. The hotel cafe was quiet after the morning sessions let out. Lily had claimed a corner table with her laptop and a salad she was eating without tasting, reviewing vendor invoices for the spring conference. Marcus had already claimed credit for planning. The cafe's background music was something jazzy and low. The coffee was actually good. She was highlighting a discrepancy in the floral billing when a chair slid out across from her. She looked up. Ethan Calloway sat down. He was carrying a coffee. Just one. Not extending any social niceties of offering. He set it in front of himself, settled into the chair like he had all the time in the world, and looked at her. Lily very carefully closed her laptop. "Mr. Calloway, you know my name. Everyone in this building knows your name." He nodded once, acknowledged without vanity. "I didn't get yours." "Lily Bennett." She sat up straighter. "I really am sorry about this morning. I should have double-checked the number. I was tired and You said that already." "I know, I'm not here about this morning." He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He had the manner of someone accustomed to directing conversations. Not aggressively, just with a kind of quiet certainty that the conversation would go where he intended it to go. "You work for the conference. Event management. Assistant coordinator, yes." "Who put together the gala last night?" She paused. "That was a team effort." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile. "I spoke to 4 different people this morning who all claimed credit for the event. I then asked the hotel's catering director, who actually made the seating revisions on Thursday when the original plan fell through. She mentioned a name." Lily said nothing. "The floral installation," he continued, "the lighting adjustment for the main stage, the decision to move the cocktail reception 45 minutes early when the sound system check ran long, all of those were last-minute calls made by one person." He looked at her. "That was you." "I work within a team structure. Stop being modest. It doesn't suit you." He said it matter-of-factly, not unkindly. "I'm putting together a charity gala. The Calloway Foundation runs an annual event every autumn in New York. We raise funds for pediatric healthcare programs. This year, the coordinator I'd been using for 4 years had a family emergency and withdrew 6 weeks out." A beat. "I have a venue, a budget, and no one I trust to run it." Lily stared at him. "I'd like to offer you a contract," he said. She found her voice. "You don't know anything about me. I know you redid an entire seating arrangement for 300 people in 4 hours without panicking, renegotiated the floral contract 48 hours before an event without losing the vendor, and talked the hotel's AV team into setting up a backup system they initially said wasn't possible." He paused. "I also know you're being significantly underpaid for what you actually do, and that the person taking credit for your work is a mediocre man with a good haircut." Lily opened her mouth, closed it. "The contract is substantial," Ethan continued. "I'll have my assistant send you the full terms, but the general number—" He named a figure. Lily's hand tightened around her salad fork. That number was more than she made in a year, more than a year and a half, if she was honest. "That's—" She cleared her throat. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need someone competent, and I don't have time to vet an agency. You've already demonstrated your competence." He stood, picking up his coffee. "Take the weekend to think about it. My assistant will reach out Monday." He was halfway to the door when she said without planning to, "The gala last night. Did you actually think it was well done, or were you just using it as an opening?" He turned back. That almost smile again. "Both," he said, and he walked out. Lily sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her fork, looked at her salad, and thought, "I am absolutely not calling anyone about this until I've eaten something." She called her sister-in-law Dana from the bathroom of her hotel room 30 minutes later. "He sat down at your table?" Dana's voice had the particular pitch it took on when something was exciting. "Just sat down? Without asking?" "Without asking. Just pulled out the chair." Lily was sitting on the edge of the tub, phone pressed to her ear. "He already knew everything I'd done at the gala. He'd been asking around." "That's either very impressive or very creepy." It was impressive. It was annoying that it was impressive. She rubbed her temple. "Dana, The number he quoted, "Tell me," she told her. A pause. "Lily, I know. That's, I know. That's enough to get ahead on the, I know." She pressed her fingers against her eyes. "But I looked him up. He's Ethan Callaway. I know who he is. He's terrifying on paper. Do you know what they call him in the industry?" "Tell me." "The calculator. Because apparently he can walk into a failing project and within 20 minutes tell you exactly how and why it's failing, and he's always right. And the number he gives you is always exactly right, and it makes people feel like he's not actually human." She stood up. "He looked at me this morning like, I don't know, like I was something he hadn't encountered before." "When you say this morning, the cafe, I mean, at the cafe. You said this morning first. Did something happen before the cafe?" Lily was silent for exactly 1 second too long. "Lily Marie Bennett. It was completely innocent. I was asleep. She took a breath. "I went to the wrong room last night. I was exhausted and the key cards are defective, and I walked into his suite and slept in his bed and didn't realize it until morning." The silence on the other end was the loudest silence she'd ever heard. "I'm going to need you to say all of that again," Dana said. She took the contract, not impulsively. She spent the weekend reading every clause, forwarding it to her cousin, who was a paralegal, asking 3 questions via email that were answered within 2 hours by someone named Andrea, who identified herself as Mr. Callaway's executive assistant. The answers were clear and fair. The terms were, if anything, more favorable on second reading than first. She took the contract because Sophie needed new school supplies, and the rent on the apartment she shared with her niece had gone up $200, and her own company hadn't given her a raise in 18 months. She took it because she was good at this, and she knew she was good at this, and it was time to stop being invisible. She did not take it because of the way he'd looked at her in the cafe, or the almost smile, or the fact that he'd noticed every single decision she'd made under pressure and traced them back to her specifically. She was very clear with herself about this. The first meeting was at a Chicago office, a space on the 42nd floor of a building downtown that had been designed by someone who believed in glass and negative space and very little else. Everything was angular and expensive and slightly cold. The view was enormous. Lily arrived 7 minutes early. A small, precise woman named Andrea met her at the elevator, walked her to a conference room, and offered water in a tone that suggested the offer was a formality. Ethan arrived 3 minutes later. He'd shed the conference formality slightly. Today he was in a dark blue shirt, no jacket, sleeves already rolled to the elbows. He had a folder and a tablet and the same economy of movement she'd noticed before, the sense that he didn't do anything that wasn't intentional. He sat across from her, opened the folder, and said, "The gala is November 14th. We have 11 weeks. That's workable. The venue is the Grand Meridian in Manhattan, capacity for 400. We've done this event there for 3 years, so the staff know the foundation's preferences." He slid a document across the table. "Last year's program for reference. Budget ceiling is here." He tapped the number. Lily looked at it. "That's generous. It's what it costs to do it properly. What's the fundraising target?" $2.3 million. She looked up. "We hit 2.1 last year," he said. "I'd like to do better." She pulled the program toward her, scanning it with the part of her brain that immediately started cataloging, timeline, vendor needs, logistics pressure points. "What changed about last year's program that you'd want to adjust?" "The auction ran long. It lost the room." He leaned back slightly. "People stop bidding when they're uncomfortable. The energy dropped in the 3rd quarter and we never fully recovered it." "Was it the items or the auctioneer?" He paused, looked at her in a way that suggested this was a more specific question than he'd expected. "The auctioneer. Then we need a different one. Someone with instincts for reading a room, not just cycling through lots." She was already writing. "I know 2 people who do this well. I'll get you comparison materials." She looked up. "What's your opening act? How are you framing the cause before you ask people to give? We've traditionally done a video presentation. Video is passive. People watch and feel briefly moved and then the moment passes." She hesitated, wondering if she'd overstepped. But he was watching her with that focused attention, not interrupting. If you have families connected to the pediatric programs, parents, kids who've been through treatment, a live segment is harder, more uncomfortable, but people give more because they can't look away from something real. Silence. I'll need to speak with the foundation director, Ethan said, but I've thought the same thing for 2 years and couldn't get traction on it. Something in his voice shifted almost imperceptibly. Apparently it took an outside perspective, or just someone who'd say it out loud. Yes, he said. That's what I meant. They worked for 3 hours. At some point, Andrea appeared silently with coffee that Lily didn't remember ordering. She took hers black without thinking, and realized a moment later that somehow it arrived black, without her specifying. At the end, Ethan walked her to the elevator. You have a niece, he said, and she turned to look at him, surprised. Yes, Maya. She's 6. She lives with me. She watched him. How do you know that? You mentioned her in your email when you asked about the contract timeline around school schedules. He met her eyes. I remember details. The elevator arrived. I have a daughter, he said before she stepped in. Sophie, she's 7. Something moved across his face. Not quite a softening, but a shift. She's why the pediatric programs matter. Lily held the elevator door. Is she okay? She is now. He nodded once. She had a rough few years. He said it like a door that had been opened slightly, and she understood instinctively that this was more than he usually offered. I'm glad she's okay, Lily said. The door began to close. So am I, he said. 3 weeks in, she had a vendor shortlist, a revised program structure, 2 potential auctioneers, and a standing Tuesday and Thursday meeting with Ethan that had started at 90 minutes and was now consistently running 3 hours. She also had a problem. His name was Marcus Holt. Her supervisor had figured out, via the mysterious osmosis of office gossip, that she'd taken on outside contract work. He'd also figured out the name attached to the contract, and he'd responded by becoming the specific flavor of difficult that passive-aggressive underachievers specialize in. Slow-walking her approvals, scheduling her for tasks on her days off, ceasing senior leadership on minor corrections. She hadn't told Ethan this. It wasn't his problem. She was managing it. She was managing it until the Thursday meeting in week 4, when she showed up 45 minutes late because Marcus had called an emergency team meeting at 9 a.m. that lasted until noon and accomplished nothing, and she'd missed 2 trains trying to untangle herself from it. She arrived at Ethan's office flushed and apologetic, and he looked at her for one moment before he said, What happened? Work conflict. I'm sorry. Sit down. Do you want coffee? I'm fine. Lily. His voice was quiet. You've been on time for every meeting. You've sent materials 48 hours early, consistently. Something happened. He paused. You don't have to tell me what it is, but don't apologize for being 40 minutes late when it's clearly not something you chose. She sat down. She looked at the table. It's my supervisor, she said. He found out about this contract and he's been creating obstacles. It's petty. I'm handling it. Is there a conflict of interest concern on his end? No, it's not that. She pressed her lips together. He took credit for a lot of my work over the past 2 years. I think he knows this contract proves the gap between what I can do and what he claims I can do, and it makes him nervous. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Do you want to continue working at your company? She looked up. What? It's a straightforward question. Do you want to stay there after this contract ends? She thought about it, honestly thought about it, instead of deflecting. No, she said. I don't think I do. Then stop protecting them. He picked up his pen. Do your work for the gala. Do it well. When this is finished, you'll have a different set of options. He looked at her. That's all you need to worry about. She wanted to say that was easy for him to say. That he had never had to calculate whether the professional cost of pushing back was worth the stability of staying small. That some people couldn't afford the luxury of walking away. She didn't say any of it because she suspected he already knew, and because the way he'd said do your work had a particular quality to it. Not dismissive, but genuinely certain. Like he'd already seen how this ended for her and was waiting for her to catch up. She opened her folder. The auctioneer, she said. I've narrowed it to 1. She met Sophie on a Tuesday in week 5. It wasn't planned. Ethan had mentioned offhandedly that his office in Chicago had a small room where Sophie sometimes worked on homework after school when his regular childcare arrangements ran late. Lily had filed this information away without particularly examining it. She was waiting in the conference room with her laptop when the door opened and a small person appeared. 7 years old, dark hair like Ethan's, but curlier, wearing a purple sweater with a paint stain on the cuff that had clearly been there long enough to be permanent. She was carrying a backpack that was visibly too large for her and a library book about volcanoes. She looked at Lily with the frank, unselfconscious appraisal that children specialize in. "Are you the lady doing the party?" she asked. "The gala, yeah." Lily smiled. "I'm Lily." "I'm Sophie." She came in, dropped her backpack with a considerable thud, and climbed into a chair. "Dad says you're very good at your job." "That's nice of him to say." "He doesn't say that about most people." Sophie opened her volcano book with the ease of a small person stating fact, not delivering a compliment. "He said you argue with him about things." Lily blinked. "I offer alternative perspectives." "That's what arguing is?" Sophie didn't look up from her book. "I argue with him about bedtime. He says I have alternative perspectives. It means the same thing." Lily pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. "Do you like volcanoes?" Sophie asked. "I don't know much about them." "They're destructive," Sophie said with unmistakable relish. "But also they make new land, so they're destructive and creative at the same time." She looked up. "Dad says most interesting things are like that." Lily looked at this 7-year-old and thought, "You are going to be absolutely terrifying when you grow up." "That's actually pretty smart," she said. "I know." Sophie returned to her book. "You can do your work. I don't bother people when they're working." And she didn't. For the next 2 hours, while Lily finalized the program timeline and Sophie read about volcanic rock formations, the room was quiet in a way that felt, improbably, like company. When Ethan came in at 5:30, he stopped in the doorway and looked at the two of them. Sophie cross-legged in her chair, Lily with her laptop and 3 color-coded folders, and something happened to his face that Lily almost didn't catch. Something that went quiet and careful, the way faces go when people see things they're afraid to want. "Ready?" he said to Sophie. "Lily's good at her job," Sophie announced, sliding off the chair. "You were right." "I usually am," he said, and he looked at Lily when he said it. Boom. She was on the phone with the venue at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, pacing her apartment's small kitchen while Maya slept in the next room, when she realized something was wrong. It wasn't a dramatic realization. It arrived quietly, the way most inconvenient truths do. She'd been thinking about the meeting Tuesday and not about the gala, and when she'd been thinking about the gala, she'd been picturing the look on his face when a program element came together exactly as she'd predicted. And when she'd been picturing his face, She stopped pacing. She set the phone down on the counter. "No," she told herself, clearly and directly. "Absolutely not. He is the client. He is a billionaire. He lives in a completely different category of existence. He is your employer for approximately 7 more weeks, and then this chapter closes, and you build your career on what you've learned, and you do not." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unsaved number she'd memorized without meaning to. "Spoke to the foundation director today. He's on board with the live segment." "Good call." She stared at it. Then she typed back, "Told you." The response came in 11 seconds. "You did." And then, after a pause, "How's your niece?" Lily sat down on her kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, phone in her hands. "She made a volcano in class today," she typed, "with baking soda and vinegar. She was very proud of it." "Sophie would like her," he wrote back. "She has strong opinions about volcanoes." "I know," Lily wrote. "She told me." A pause. Then, "She talked to you for 2 hours and didn't look up from that book once." That's the Sophie version of deciding she likes someone. Lily read that 3 times. "I should let you go," she typed finally. "Early call tomorrow. Good night, Lily." She sat on the kitchen floor for another 5 minutes before she got up. She didn't examine why. The auction venue confirmation arrived on a Friday morning, and Lily printed it, clipped it to the program binder, and let herself feel good about it for exactly 12 minutes before her phone rang with a Chicago area code she didn't recognize. It was the Grand Meridian's event manager. There had been a fire. Kitchen fire the night before contained quickly. No injuries, no structural damage. But the kitchen itself and a portion of the main ballroom service corridor had sustained significant damage. The venue was suspended from hosting events for a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks pending inspection and repair. November 14th was 8 weeks and 4 days away. Lily sat down. She called Ethan. He picked up on the second ring. Lily, the Grand Meridian had a fire last night. She kept her voice even. She'd trained herself to deliver bad news this way. Clean, complete, no cushioning. Kitchen and service corridor damage. They're suspended through mid-November, minimum. We've lost the venue. Silence. How long ago did you find out? He asked. 4 minutes. All right. A pause. The quality of his silence was different from other people's silence. It didn't feel like shock or avoidance. It felt like thinking. What are our options in Manhattan for November 14th with 400 capacity? I don't know yet. I'm going to start calling now. It may be that we have to move the date, but I'd like to exhaust the venue options first before we consider. I have a penthouse terrace, he said. In Manhattan. The building is mine. Lily stopped. It holds 300 comfortably, 350 if we configure the layout right, he said. It's not a conventional event space, which means we'd need a full vendor build-out. But it's available, she said. It's available. And you own the building, so we don't need to navigate a venue contract. Correct. She pulled up the program on her laptop, started mentally walking through the layout requirements. The catering infrastructure would need to come in fully external. We'd need tent structures depending on weather. It has a retractable covering, Ethan said. I had it installed 2 years ago. Of course you did. She said it without meaning to. A pause. Is that a problem? No. She almost laughed. No, it's actually perfect. Can I see it? I need to walk the space before I can reconfigure the layout. I'll fly you to New York. It's practical. I'll be there this weekend. We can do a site walkthrough Saturday morning. He paused. Come Friday evening. I'll have Andrea book the flight. She looked around her apartment. Maya was at school. The program binder was on the table. Her half-eaten breakfast was going cold. Okay, she said. She hung up, sat back, and stared at the ceiling. Okay, she thought, is what got you into this? But she picked up her pen and started making a list because there was work to do, and whatever else was happening, the texts, the way Sophie had said you were right, like she'd heard him say it, the work was real, and she was good at it. That at least she was certain of. She was certain of almost nothing else. The flight to New York was 47 minutes, which was not enough time for Lily to talk herself out of anything. She'd flown economy before, the kind where you tuck your elbows in and hope the person next to you doesn't need the armrest. Andrea had booked her into business class without asking, and Lily had spent 10 minutes in the airport deciding whether to mention the upgrade before deciding that mentioning it would make her seem like someone who'd never been in business class, which was true, but didn't need to be announced. She put her bag in the overhead bin, accepted the sparkling water a flight attendant offered before she'd even buckled her seatbelt, and stared out the window at the tarmac. She had a site walkthrough in the morning. She had a list of 12 questions about the penthouse terrace layout. She had a revised vendor shortlist that accounted for the complete absence of a built-in kitchen. She did not have a plan for being inside Ethan Calloway's home, which was fine. It was a professional visit. She'd been in clients' homes before. Once she'd managed an anniversary dinner in a man's home in Evanston that had 30 rooms and a koi pond he was inexplicably proud of. This was no different. She'd walk the space, take measurements, ask her 12 questions, and leave. The car service Ethan had arranged met her at LaGuardia. She told Andrea she could take a cab, and Andrea had said, with the polite finality of someone who has had this conversation before, that Mr. Calloway had already arranged the car. Lily had let it go. The driver took her to a hotel in Midtown, a different hotel from the one Ethan's building was in, which she'd confirmed specifically. She wasn't going to make that mistake twice in any sense of the phrase. She checked in, stood in the shower for 15 minutes, and called Maya. Are you in New York? Maya asked. Her voice had the breathless quality it took on when she was excited. She was staying with Dana for the weekend, which meant she'd been eating cereal for dinner and staying up an hour past her bedtime, and everyone involved was pretending this wasn't happening. I'm in New York, Lily confirmed. Is it like the movies? It's loud and it smells a little bit like a parking garage. I want to go. Someday. Lily sat on the edge of the hotel bed. Are you behaving for Aunt Dana? She lets me watch 2 shows. That's not what I asked. Yes, Maya said, with the specific dignity of a 6-year-old who is absolutely not behaving. Can you bring me something? What do you want? Something that says New York on it. I'll find something. Lily lay back on the bed. Go to sleep at a reasonable time. Aunt Dana said, I know what Aunt Dana said. Go to sleep at a reasonable time anyway. A pause. Then, Lily? Yeah? Are you okay? Lily stared at the ceiling. 6 years old, and she already had Dana's instincts, the ability to hear the thing underneath the thing. I'm okay, Bug. I'm just tired. Okay. A pause. Love you. Love you more. She hung up and lay there for another few minutes, looking at the ceiling of a hotel room that cost more per night than her weekly grocery budget, and tried not to think about the fact that she was here because a man she was dangerously close to, thinking about too much, had flown her here, and that tomorrow morning she'd be standing in his home. She fell asleep with the lamp on. The walkthrough was scheduled for 9. She arrived at 8:57. The building was on the Upper West Side, not ostentatious from the street, which surprised her. She'd expected something more aggressive in its statement-making, but the facade was older, pre-war brick with clean windows and a doorman who had her name before she gave it. He walked her to a private elevator without ceremony. The penthouse took up the entire top floor and a portion of the roof. She knew this from the floor plan Andrea had emailed, but knowing it and stepping into it were different experiences. The interior was not what she'd expected, and she was getting tired of Ethan Calloway not being what she expected. She'd anticipated something cold, glass and chrome and the aesthetic of a man who used his home as an extension of his professional image. What she found instead was a space that had clearly been lived in, and lived in by someone who had a child. There were books, a lot of books, on actual shelves that had clearly been touched, not arranged by a decorator. A drawing on the refrigerator she could see through the open kitchen doorway. A small pair of sneakers near the hall closet that were very purple and very muddy, and had clearly not been put away by anyone. Ethan came in from a hallway. He was in jeans and a gray pullover, and she registered the slight adjustment her brain made when she saw him outside of a professional context. Not the conference suit, not the office shirt. Just a person. A tired one, actually. There were shadows under his eyes. You found it, he said. The doorman was very efficient. That's David. He's been here longer than I have. He looked at her. Coffee? Please. They sat at the kitchen island while the coffee brewed, and she spread the revised floor plan on the counter and walked him through her preliminary questions. He answered each one directly. The retractable coverings dimensions, the load capacity of the terrace floor, whether the building had freight elevator access for vendor deliveries. He'd already called the building's property manager before she arrived, and he had half the answers she needed before she asked them. You thought ahead, she said. I assumed you'd want specifics. Most clients wait for me to ask. Most clients aren't running the event in their own building. He poured the coffee, set hers in front of her without asking how she took it. Black, no sugar. She noticed again that he'd filed it away from the first time. She wrapped her hands around the mug. Can I see the terrace? He led her up a half flight of stairs and through a glass door, and she stepped out and forgot for a moment to think about anything else. New York from up here was enormous. Not just wide, dimensional. The skyline pressed in from every direction, close and textured and full of noise, that somehow, at this height, felt softened. The terrace itself was large, or larger than the floor plan had conveyed, with clean lines and good bones and the retractable glass covering that ran on a track above the perimeter. She walked it slowly. She had her phone out, taking measurements and photos, and she was already reconfiguring the layout in her head. The dining section here, the stage against that wall where the skyline would be behind the presenters, the cocktail area spread across the eastern end. It'll actually be better, she said, and she meant it. The Grand Meridian's main room was beautiful, but it was generic. It's a story. People will remember an event on a rooftop overlooking New York. They'll associate the space with the cause. Ethan was standing near the edge, looking at the city. She'd noticed he did that when he was thinking, went still and looked at something distant, like he needed physical space around him to process. Sophie wants to come, he said. Lily lowered her phone. To the gala? She's been asking. She knows what the event is for. I've been talking to her about the foundation since she was 4. A pause. She's old enough to understand what the money goes toward. She spent enough time in hospitals to have opinions about it. Lily felt something careful happen in her chest. What happened, if you don't mind my asking? He turned. For a moment she thought he'd redirect. He had a way of acknowledging questions without answering them that she'd noticed in professional settings. But instead he said, her mother died when Sophie was 2, heart condition. And then Sophie herself, at 4, she had a cardiac event. Minor, as those things go, which is a phrase I've learned to use without wanting to put my hand through a wall. His voice was even. She was in the hospital for 6 weeks. She's fine now. She's been fine for 3 years, but the pediatric unit at New York Presbyterian, the staff there. He stopped. That's why, Lily said. That's why. She looked at the skyline and thought about a 4-year-old in a hospital and a man sitting in a waiting room somewhere in this city, and how certain fears don't leave you when the crisis ends. They just get quieter. Sophie can come, she said. I'll build her a job. Every good event needs someone to hand out programs. Something in his expression shifted. Not the almost smile this time. Something quieter and less guarded than that. She'll take it very seriously, he said. I'm counting on it. They went back inside. She stayed another 2 hours, working through the revised vendor list at the kitchen island while he responded to emails nearby, and it was strange and not strange at all. The specific comfort of working alongside someone who doesn't need to fill silence with words. At one point, he got up to refill her coffee without asking, and she didn't look up from her laptop, and neither of them mentioned it. She left at noon with a full revised layout, a plan for the vendor calls on Monday, and the very careful, very firm decision that whatever this feeling was, she was going to manage it professionally, and it was not going to become a problem. She was 11 blocks away when she passed a tourist shop and bought a small snow globe with the Manhattan skyline inside it for Maya. She stood on the sidewalk and shook it, and watched the fake snow fall and thought, I'm already in trouble, aren't I? It wasn't a question. She was back in Chicago by evening. The following Tuesday, she arrived at the office building for their scheduled meeting and found, in the lobby, a woman who had clearly not been placed by the universe in Lily's life to make anything easier. She was tall, the specific kind of tall that involves heels chosen precisely for their effect. Dark hair, glossy, and deliberate. Wearing a coat that cost more than Lily's monthly rent and wearing it like she'd forgotten it was on. She was standing near the elevator talking to someone on her phone, and she looked up when Lily walked in with the automatic evaluating sweep of a person accustomed to assessing competition. Lily recognized the look. She'd been on the receiving end of it her whole career from women who had the resources she didn't and used them as a quiet form of warfare. She didn't recognize the woman. Not yet. Upstairs, Andrea greeted her with slightly more tension than usual. A barely perceptible thing, the kind you only catch if you've been paying attention, and showed her to the conference room. Ethan was already there. He was standing at the window with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who has just finished a conversation he didn't enjoy. He turned when she came in, and something in his face settled, which she noticed and chose not to examine. The Meridian sent the formal release paperwork, he said. We're officially clear of the contract without penalty. That's good. She set her bag down. There was a woman in the lobby. A pause. Not long, but she'd learned to read his pauses. Vanessa Cole, he said. She's someone I was involved with. Briefly. It ended a year ago. He said it with the flatness of someone who has decided the accurate word for the relationship is ended and is not interested in searching for a softer one. Okay, Lily said, and opened her folder because it wasn't her business. He sat down. They worked. But she noticed that he checked his phone twice in the first hour, which he didn't usually do during meetings, and both times he turned it face down after. She didn't ask. Vanessa Cole found her in the building's lobby on her way out. She'd been expecting something. Some instinct had registered the woman in the lobby that morning as a loose thread. But she still wasn't entirely prepared for the way Vanessa stepped into her path with the particular confidence of someone who's decided that social niceties are for other people. You're Lily Bennett. Not a question. The event coordinator. That's right. Lily stopped, adjusted her bag strap. Can I help you? Vanessa looked at her. That same evaluating sweep, slower this time. Up close, she was strikingly beautiful in a way that was clearly maintained with significant effort and resources. She was also, Lily noticed, slightly less composed than she'd appeared from a distance. Something in her jaw. "I just wanted to meet you," Vanessa said. "Ethan's mentioned you." "I hope the feedback was useful. We're making good progress on the gala." "The gala?" A thin smile. "Of course." She tilted her head slightly. "How long have you been working with him?" "About 6 weeks. He can be very—" Vanessa paused, selecting the word with visible care. "Focused. When something interests him, it can feel more meaningful than it is." Lily held the woman's gaze. "I appreciate the warning. You don't believe you need it. I'm a professional doing a job," Lily said. "I'm not sure what you're warning me about." Vanessa's smile sharpened slightly. "Just being friendly." "Of course." Lily stepped past her. "Have a nice afternoon." She walked to the elevator and pressed the button and stood with her back very straight until the doors closed around her. In the reflection of the elevator's polished walls, she looked completely calm. She felt completely calm. She was lying to herself. She texted Dana from the cab. "Tell me something grounding." Dana replied in 40 seconds. "Maya ate an entire head of broccoli tonight. Voluntarily." Lily stared at the message, then typed, "That actually helps, thank you." She didn't tell Ethan about the conversation. She turned it over once that night and then put it down, because Vanessa Cole's parting shot had landed more precisely than she'd wanted to let on. It can feel more meaningful than it is. And the reason it had landed was that Lily had no clean answer for it. She didn't know what this was. She knew what it wasn't, professionally. She was clear on that. But she kept coming back to the way he'd told her about Sophie in the hospital, and the mud-caked purple sneakers by the closet, and the coffee that appeared black without her having to ask. And she didn't have language for what those things meant, except that they meant something. She went back to the program timeline and worked until midnight. The encounter with Vanessa Cole would have been easier to dismiss if the woman had stayed gone. She didn't. She appeared at the charity preview luncheon that Ethan's foundation hosted in week 7, an event Lily was managing alongside the gala preparations, a smaller gathering of 40 foundation donors. Lily hadn't known Vanessa would be there. She was on the guest list as a legacy donor, which was, Lily reflected, extremely well played. She was seated 3 tables from Ethan, and she worked the room with the fluency of someone who'd spent years doing it. She touched arms and laughed at the right moments, and made eye contact with Ethan 3 times during the lunch in a way that was clearly engineered. Lily was at the back of the room, coordinating with the catering staff, when a man appeared at her elbow. "You're Bennett, right? Lily Bennett." She turned. He was around 40. Well-dressed, confident in that slightly aggressive way of men who've decided confidence is a personality. "Bradley Weston," she recalled from the guest list. "Real estate developer, newer money than Ethan's circle, trying to make inroads." "That's me," she said. "I've heard good things. The Morrison event last spring. That was yours?" "I assisted on that one." She kept her eyes on the catering flow. "You're too modest." He moved slightly closer. "I'm putting together something in the spring. Private dinner, about 60 covers. I need someone with real taste. Would you have any interest in—" "I can give you my business card," she said, professionally pleasant. "I'd need to check my availability after the current contract." "Of course," he smiled, "though I'd be happy to discuss it over dinner, if that suits you better." She processed the shift in tone. "A business card will be fine." She became aware, without looking, that Ethan had crossed the room. He appeared at her other side with the smooth inevitability of someone who had made a decision and was executing it without announcing it. He placed himself in the conversation with a hand briefly at the small of her back, not possessive, just present, and extended his other hand to Weston. "Bradley." His voice was pleasant. "Good to see you here." "Calloway." Weston shook his hand, and Lily watched the slight recalibration happen in real time. "I was just speaking with Ms. Bennett. Lily's indispensable to the foundation right now." Ethan said it simply. Not as a warning, not as a declaration, just a fact. "I'd hate to lose her attention during gala prep." He glanced at her. "The florist is asking about the centerpiece sign-off." She recognized a graceful exit when she was handed one. "Excuse me," she said to Weston, and moved away. She dealt with the florist, who was not, in fact, asking about anything urgent. And when she looked back across the room, Ethan was back in conversation with a Foundation board member, and Weston had migrated to another cluster of guests. She thought about it for the rest of the event. On the drive back to his office afterward, she sat beside him in the car and looked out the window and said, without preamble, "You didn't have to do that." "Do what?" "The intervention with Weston." A pause. "He was making you uncomfortable." "I was handling it." "I know you were." He said it without apology or defensiveness. "I was also there." She turned to look at him. He was looking straight ahead. "It's not your job to manage who talks to me." "No," he agreed. So, he turned then, met her eyes. There was something in his expression that he usually kept carefully below the surface, not hidden exactly, but managed. "Weston is the kind of man who hears, 'I'll give you my business card as negotiation,'" he said. He wasn't going to stop. "And if I'd wanted to handle it myself." "You were, He stopped. The car hit a red light. "I didn't like watching it." Lily held his gaze for a moment. The honest admission sat in the space between them, neither of them quite willing to treat it as casual. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. Okay." She turned back to the window. "Just don't make a habit of it." A beat. Then, quietly, "No promises." She didn't answer, but she felt the corner of her mouth move before she stopped it. Vanessa found her again the following week, and this time there was no lobby, no distance, no professional setting to provide structure. It was at a restaurant. Lily was having lunch with her vendor contact for the audio setup, a woman named Priya, who had done 3 Callaway Foundation events and was, blessedly, exactly as efficient as Lily needed her to be. They'd wrapped their working lunch and were waiting for the check when Vanessa walked in. She saw Lily immediately, and she came directly over, which told Lily everything she needed to know about whether this was coincidence. "Lily," said warmly, as if they were old friends. "What a coincidence." Priya looked between them with the bright, polite attention of someone who has correctly identified that she's walked into the edge of someone else's story. "Vanessa," Lily said. "Priya, this is Vanessa Cole. She's a foundation donor." Priya said something polite. Vanessa smiled and did not look at Priya. "I heard the original venue fell through," Vanessa said. "Terrible luck." "We found a better option." Lily kept her voice level. "Ethan's penthouse." A small pause. "He's never hosted the gala there before. He must trust you a great deal." "He trusts the work." "Of course." Vanessa tilted her head. The warmth in her expression was the constructed kind, built for effect. "I only ask because I've known Ethan for a long time. We were very close for a while." The specific weight she placed on close was precise and deliberate. "He's a complicated man. He has a way of drawing people in, especially people who—" She glanced at Lily, a very brief sweep that managed to take in everything she needed to take in. "People who aren't used to moving in his world." Lily set her glass down. She had 2 options. She'd always had 2 options with women like this: absorb the implication and let it sit in you like a stone, or push back in the specific way that costs you something in the short term and pays you back later. "I appreciate the concern," Lily said, "but I'm not confused about the world I'm moving in. I know exactly where I am." She picked up the check folder, glanced at it, and placed her card inside. "Enjoy your lunch." She didn't look at Vanessa again. Priya waited until they were on the sidewalk. "Old girlfriend?" she asked. "Apparently." "She's threatened by you." "She's protecting territory she's decided is still hers." Lily pushed her sunglasses on. "It's a different thing." "Not that different." Lily thought about it. "No," she said. "I guess not." She told Ethan about the lunch encounter that evening. Not because she'd planned not to, had made a deliberate decision on the cab ride over that it was irrelevant, and she was above being rattled by a woman with a precise tongue and better shoes. But they were in his office, and he asked how her day had gone, and she answered honestly for about 4 sentences before she got there. He was quiet when she finished. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's not your fault. She approached you twice in 1 week specifically because she knows you're working with me. It's—" He stopped. pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose. She contacted me last week, wanting to meet. I didn't respond. You don't owe me that information. I know. He looked at her directly. I'm telling you anyway. She looked at her hands on the table, at the program binder, the vendor notes, the 3 weeks of work spread between them. Ethan. Lily. This is a professional relationship. I know that. What we're doing here is, I'm good at my job and you needed someone who's good at their job, and in 3 weeks the gala happens, and this chapter of your life closes, and Lily, his voice was quiet. You don't have to argue yourself out of something that hasn't happened yet. She looked up. He wasn't challenging her, wasn't pressing. His expression was the steadiest thing in the room. The particular stillness of a man who has decided to be honest and is waiting to see if it was the right decision. I'm not trying to... She stopped. I'm being careful. I know you are. A pause. You're allowed to be careful. I'm just... He exhaled. Being careful isn't the same as being dishonest. She didn't answer that. She looked at the city through the office windows, the lights beginning to multiply as evening came in, and she thought about what he'd said on the terrace. She's been fine for 3 years. And the way he'd said she brought warmth back into his home to no one, just sitting with the knowledge of it. The auction order needs to be finalized by Friday, she said. He nodded. Let it go. They worked until 9:30, and when she finally packed up her bag, he walked her to the elevator like he always did. In the doorway of the office, she turned back. Sophie's drawing, she said. The one on your refrigerator. Which one? She puts approximately 400 on there. The one with the 2 figures in it, a tall one and a small one. He looked at her. She labeled them, Lily said. I saw it when I got water this morning. The tall one says Daddy, the small one says Sophie, and there's a 3rd figure off to the side. She held his gaze. That one doesn't have a label yet. She stepped into the elevator. The door closed. She stood very still all the way down, looking at her own reflection in the polished metal, and she thought, careful doesn't begin to cover it. Thought, because the things she hadn't said, the things she'd carried out of his office and into the elevator and into the Chicago night air, was that the unlabeled figure in Sophie's drawing was wearing a yellow dress. She owned one yellow dress. She'd worn it to the second Tuesday meeting. She pressed her hands against her face in the empty elevator and felt the specific panic of a woman who has been careful for years and years and is beginning to understand that careful is not the same as safe. The doors opened to the lobby. She walked out into the cold. 3 weeks to the gala, and she had everything under control except the one thing that mattered most. 3 weeks felt like nothing and everything at the same time. Lily had worked events with tighter timelines. A corporate launch she'd rebuilt in 11 days after the original coordinator walked off the job. A wedding she'd salvaged 48 hours out when the venue double-booked, and the bride was in genuine danger of losing it completely. She knew how to compress time. She knew how to make 3 weeks feel like 2 months if she organized it right. What she didn't know how to do was organize herself. The drawing stayed with her, not as a romantic thing. She kept telling herself that, and she almost believed it, but as a fact she couldn't unknow. Sophie had put a 3rd figure in that picture, a figure in yellow. And Lily had walked out of that office building into November air and gone home and sat at her kitchen table and stared at her laptop screen without reading a single word on it for a solid 20 minutes. Maya had found her there. Why are you just sitting? Thinking. About what? Work. Maya had looked at her with 6-year-old skepticism that was frankly insulting in how accurate it was. You make a different face when you're thinking about work. Go to bed. It's 7:45. Then go to bed in 15 minutes. She'd closed the laptop and made tea she didn't drink and told herself clearly and out loud to the empty kitchen, this is a job. In 3 weeks it ends. And you go back to your life, which is a good life, which is enough. She believed it about 60%. The remaining 40% was the problem. The vendor calls that week were relentless. She was on the phone by 8 every morning. The tent rental company, the catering firm she'd brought in from the vendor list Priya had recommended, the florist who had very strong opinions about centerpiece height and needed to be managed with the specific patience of someone diffusing something small but volatile. The lighting designer flew in from Los Angeles on Thursday and spent 4 hours on the terrace with Lily, walking the perimeter, discussing angles and color temperature and the way artificial light behaves against a New York skyline. Ethan was in and out of the penthouse that day. He had his own meetings, his own machinery running, and mostly he left them alone. But at one point he came out with 2 coffees and handed one to the lighting designer, who looked startled because this was not something CEOs typically did, and stood for a moment watching Lily talk through the stage lighting scheme with the focus of someone who retained information completely. "The warm tone on the stage," he said, when the designer stepped away to take a call. "You said amber, not white. White makes people look tired under it. The donors are paying attention to the speakers. They should feel awake." She looked at him. "You were listening." "I was walking through." "You were listening," she said again, and he didn't deny it a second time. After the designer left, Ethan stood at the terrace railing while Lily made notes, and she was aware of him the way you're aware of weather, the specific pressure of someone's presence taking up space in a room. "You're good at managing people," he said. "It's the job." "It's not just the job. The way you talked to him, you already knew which of his ideas you were going to use before he finished explaining them, but you let him finish." He turned to look at her. "You gave him the experience of being heard." "He was being heard. I was genuinely listening, while also already knowing." She looked up. "Is that a criticism?" "It's an observation." A pause. "Most people in your position would have cut him off. It would have been faster." "Faster doesn't mean better." She clicked her pen. "He'll execute better if he feels like the vision is partly his. The best event I ever ran, the client thought she'd made half the decisions herself. She'd made about 3, but she owned every single piece of it." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Does that ever bother you? Not getting the credit? I used to work for the man who took all of it. That bothered me." She set her pen down. "But doing the work well, that part doesn't need an audience." She glanced at him. "You know that. You're not exactly running around requiring acknowledgement. I'm a billionaire. I don't need to. That's not why." She said it before she thought about whether she should. "You could be the loudest person in every room you walk into. You're not. That's a choice." He looked at her steadily. "Or a habit. Habits are choices that calcified." She picked up her pen again. "Same thing." He made a sound that might have been a short laugh, not the almost smile, something less managed than that. She caught it and made herself look back at her notes. The gala was in 19 days. She was going to be fine. She kept saying that. She was at the kitchen island in his penthouse 9 days before the event. She'd developed a habit of working there. The counter space was better than anything in her hotel room, and Ethan had stopped pretending he minded when Sophie came home from school in a state. Not crying exactly. Sophie seemed to have a philosophical objection to crying in front of people, which was something Lily recognized from her own childhood. But her eyes were too bright and her jaw was too tight, and she dropped her backpack with significantly more force than the usual thud. "Hey." Lily looked up. "How was school?" "Fine." Sophie climbed onto the bar stool across from Lily and opened her backpack, pulling out a workbook. She had a very deliberate quality to her movements, like she was placing each action carefully. Lily waited. 2 minutes passed. "Emma said my drawing was weird," Sophie said without looking up. Lily set her pen down. "Which drawing?" "The one I did for art class. We had to draw our family." A pause. "I drew me and Dad, and I drew—" She stopped. "It was just a drawing." Lily looked at this 7-year-old with the tight jaw and the volcano book and the purple sneakers, and understood with the precision of someone who'd raised a little girl that Sophie wasn't going to say the rest of it, and that pushing would close the door completely. "Emma's wrong," Lily said. "Weird drawings are the good ones. Normal drawings are boring." Sophie looked up. "That's what Dad says." "Your dad has good taste." A pause. Sophie looked back at her workbook. "Did you draw your family when you were little?" "I did. I drew me and my sister and my parents." Lily considered. "We always had kind of a messy family, lots of different people in and out." She thought of her own childhood, her mother's second marriage, the step-siblings, the blended holidays that were chaotic and loud and never quite fit the template of what a family was supposed to look like. "I used to use a lot of pencil so I could erase and redraw." "Why?" "Because I wasn't sure who went in the picture." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "That sounds hard." "A little. But it also meant I got to decide." Lily picked her pen back up. That part was good. Sophie looked at her workbook again, then, very quietly, I put someone in mine, in the drawing. Yeah? A third person, next to me and Dad. She didn't look up. Emma said that was the weird part. Because it's just me and Dad. There's no third person. Lily held very still. Emma's never been to your place, Lily said carefully. She doesn't know who's in your family. Sophie looked up then. Her eyes were completely steady. 7 years old, and she had Ethan's particular quality of looking at things directly, without flinching. You're not, she said. In our family, you work for Dad. That's true. But I put you in anyway. A beat. Is that okay? Lily's throat did something she wasn't prepared for. She breathed through it. Yeah, she said. That's okay. Sophie nodded, satisfied, and looked back at her workbook. When Ethan came in 20 minutes later, Lily was making notes with the focused efficiency of someone who has recently been through something she intends to process later, privately, where no one can see her face. He read the room. She'd noticed he was good at this, the quick calibration of walking into a space and knowing where the weight was. And he looked at Sophie, who was doing homework with exaggerated concentration, and then at Lily. She gave a small shake of her head. Not now. She's fine. He made coffee. Gave Sophie the small questioning look that parents develop, the one that asks how bad is it without words. Sophie shrugged with one shoulder. He took that and filed it and set a glass of juice on the counter next to her without comment. Later, Sophie in her room, doors closed, the penthouse quiet, Lily was packing up her bag when Ethan came and stood in the kitchen doorway. She told you something, he said. She had a rough day at school. The drawing thing. Her teacher mentioned it. Emma Russo gave Sophie a hard time in art class. He leaned against the doorframe. Sophie won't talk to me about it. She talked to me about it. A pause. Something passed through his expression. Not quite hurt, not quite jealousy, something more complicated than both. What did she say? Lily thought about the answer, about the word family and the word okay, and what a 7-year-old had trusted her with. She said Emma was wrong, Lily said. And I agreed. He looked at her for a long moment. That's not all she said. No. She picked up her bag. But the rest was hers to share. He nodded, slowly, like someone accepting something they don't entirely like but understand the reason for. She was at the door when he said, She puts you in everything now. Drawings, stories she writes, this thing she does where she sets the table and adds a third place, even when it's just the two of us. Lily stopped. I notice things, he said. It's the habit. You pointed that out. She turned back to look at him. He was still in the doorway, arms crossed loosely, and the city behind him through the windows was doing its perpetual lit-up thing that made everything feel slightly more significant than it probably was. Ethan. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I leave in 9 days. I know when the gala is. I mean, after. The contract ends. I go back to Chicago. She gestured between them, the kitchen, the penthouse, the entire compressed world of the last 2 months. This stops being the thing it is right now. I know that too. Sophie's going to... Lily. He said her name quietly. I'm not asking you to stay. She felt that land somewhere specific. Then what are you... I'm just telling you what I notice. A pause. That's all. She stood there for a moment. At the door of his penthouse, bag on her shoulder, 9 days left, the city spread out behind him like a backdrop someone had designed for maximum emotional difficulty. Good night, she said. Good night. She went to the elevator and wrote it down and stood in the lobby for 15 seconds before she walked out. She knew what she felt. She'd known for a while. The problem wasn't the feeling. Feelings were just weather. They move through you if you let them. The problem was the specific quality of this one. How it wasn't sharp and overwhelming, but quiet and deep. The kind that doesn't make noise but doesn't leave. The problem was Sophie's drawing. The problem was coffee that arrived black without asking. The problem was that she'd been careful her entire adult life and she was running out of reasons why. She called Dana that night. I'm in trouble, she said without preamble. I know, Dana said. I've known for about 3 weeks. Why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to figure it out yourself. A pause. How bad is it? His daughter drew me into a picture of their family. Dana was quiet. She added a third figure. She said she put me in because she didn't explain why. She didn't have to. Lily was sitting on the hotel bed, shoes still on. Dana, she's 7. She lost her mother when she was 2, and I've been walking in and out of that penthouse for 2 months, and she attached, Dana said. Not unkindly. And now I leave in 9 days and she goes back to it being just the two of them, and Her voice caught on something. She stopped, pushed through it. I'm not afraid of getting hurt, that's the thing. That's the part that scares me. I'm afraid of hurting them. Dana was quiet for a moment. Have you talked to him? We've been talking around it for 2 months. Not around it, about it. Dana, Lily, you're afraid. That's okay. But you're using I might hurt them as a reason not to try. And that's a different thing from actually protecting them. A pause. Does he know how you feel? He knows more than I've said. She stopped. He notices things. He noticed things about me before I'd said them out loud. Then he knows. She didn't answer. What happens after the gala? Dana asked. I don't know. And that was honest. She genuinely didn't know. Whether the distance would do what distance was supposed to do, or whether it would just be distance. Okay, Dana said. Then find out. She hung up. She sat there for another few minutes. Then she took off her shoes, changed into pajamas, and set her alarm for 6, because there was a catering walkthrough in the morning, and whatever she was feeling, the gala was in 9 days. She was not going to let the gala fail. That was the one fixed point. Everything else could be uncertain. Her heart, her decisions, the particular gravity of a man who remembered how she took her coffee. But the event would be exactly what she'd promised it would be. She slept 4 hours and woke up ready. The catering walkthrough was clean. The florist crisis happened on Thursday, not the centerpiece height, which she'd preemptively resolved, but a supplier issue with the white ranunculus that the florist had promised and now couldn't deliver. Lily spent 40 minutes on the phone, found an alternative supplier in Connecticut, approved the substitution, and sent the florist a revised spec sheet before noon. Priya called at 2 to say the audio setup was complete and had tested perfectly. The lighting designer sent the final plan with 2 adjustments Lily had asked for and 1 additional suggestion she liked well enough to approve. 6 days out, the event was in better shape than anything she'd worked on at her actual job. She knew it. She felt it in the specific way you feel when something you've built is going to hold. Not arrogance, just the quiet recognition of work done right. Ethan knew it too. She could see it in the way he moved through their meetings. Less problem-solving, more anticipating. The particular ease of a man who has handed control to someone competent and is allowing himself to trust it. He told her on Wednesday evening, casually, while they were reviewing the final program order. The Foundation Board saw the event overview today. Richard Harmon said it was the most thoughtful proposal he'd seen in 12 years of board meetings. Richard Harmon is the one who never finishes his sentences, right? He finished every sentence. She looked up. That's actually impressive. That's what I said. And there was that almost smile, the one she'd cataloged months ago and watched evolve into something less managed. You should feel good about this. I'll feel good about it Saturday night when it's done. You do this every time. You won't let yourself... Ethan, she looked at him. I've had events go wrong in the last hour. Speeches run long. Auctioneers freeze. Donors argue with each other over lots. A beat. I'll celebrate when there's something to celebrate. He looked at her for a moment. Fair enough? Thank you for the board feedback. It's not sentiment, it's accurate. I know. That's why I'm thanking you. He went back to the program. She went back to hers. The penthouse was quiet around them, Sophie asleep already, the city doing its endless, luminous thing outside. My wife, Ethan said without looking up. She went still. Her name was Claire. We met in our mid-20s. She was funny, the kind of funny that sneaks up on you. He was looking at the program, but she understood he wasn't reading it. She died before Sophie could remember her. I've spent 7 years trying to describe someone to a child who never got to know her, and He stopped. It's an odd thing, describing a whole person through stories. Does Sophie ask about her? Constantly, in phases. She'll go months without mentioning it, and then she'll ask 3 questions in a row while I'm making dinner. He looked up. I never mind the questions. I mind that I don't have enough answers. Lily set her pen down. What do you mean? I know Claire. I know how she laughed, what she ordered at restaurants, the specific way she mispronounced particularly her whole life and refused to be corrected. A pause. But Sophie wants to know who her mother was as a mother, and I can't tell her that because Claire didn't get to be one. His voice was even, controlled, but underneath the control was the bedrock kind of grief, the kind that doesn't make scenes. I can tell Sophie everything about the woman I married. I can't tell her the part that was meant for her. The room was very quiet. I think, Lily said slowly, that might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me. He looked at her. You usually edit, she said. You say exactly enough. You choose what goes in. She held his gaze. That one wasn't edited. A pause. No, he said. It wasn't. The something that had been building for weeks, the coffee, the drawings, the late evenings, all of it, pressed up against the surface between them, and neither of them looked away. Lily, he said. His voice was different, still quiet, but the evenness was gone. She made a decision, not impulsively. She'd been making this decision for weeks without knowing it, and the knowing of it finally caught up with the making. She stood up, walked around the kitchen island, which was not far but felt significant. She stopped a foot from him. I leave in 6 days, she said. I know. I don't know what that means for... I know. And Sophie. Lily. He stood. Same height gap as always, close enough now that she was aware of the specific warmth of another person. I've been thinking about this since Chicago. Since you walked out of my elevator at 9:30 and texted me from the cab to confirm the Tuesday meeting like we hadn't just... He stopped. I don't do this. I haven't done this in years. I'm not impulsive and I'm not... I know you're not. But I am. I have been... I can't... He exhaled. I don't have the right words for this. That's very unusual for you. Yes, he said. It is. She reached up and straightened his collar, which didn't need straightening, and she was aware that this was a pretext, and he was aware that it was a pretext, and neither of them pretended otherwise. His hand covered hers. Still, just that. Both of them standing in his kitchen at 11:30 with the city behind them and Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator, and 6 days left on a contract she'd taken because she needed the money and ended up needing something else entirely. I'm scared, she said, because it was true, and because he'd been honest with her and she owed him the same. Of what specifically? Of doing this and having it cost us both something we can't fix. She looked at him. I'm scared of being the thing Sophie loses too. His hand tightened slightly on hers. Not a grip, a steadiness. I'm scared of that too, he said. I've been scared of exactly that for weeks. It hasn't made me want this less. She held his gaze, and then he kissed her. Not the way she might have imagined, which would have been some cinematic sweeping thing. It wasn't that. It was quiet. Careful in the way that's different from held back. The specific tenderness of a man who has been thinking about something for a long time and, now that the moment is real, is moving through it like it matters. She kissed him back. When they pulled back, she pressed her forehead to his jaw for a moment and felt him exhale. Long and slow, the breath of someone setting something down that they'd been carrying for a while. 6 days, she said. I know. We have to finish the gala first. I know that too. I'm serious. Lily. He pulled back far enough to look at her. The almost smile had become something real. I am completely aware of how serious you are. It is one of the things He stopped. The gala will get done. Good. She stepped back, picked up her pen, sat back down at the island. Because the program order on page 3 still has the fund totals before the closing remarks, and it should be the other way around. He stood there for a moment, looking at her. Then he sat down. Page 3, he said. Page 3. He opened his program, found page 3, made the note, and they worked for another hour in a penthouse in Manhattan while November pressed cold against the windows, and the city kept its eternal, indifferent, magnificent noise, and nothing was different except that everything was, quietly, completely different. At midnight, she packed her bag. He walked her to the elevator, same as always. The doors opened. She stepped in and turned. He was looking at her with the expression he'd stopped managing, the one that was just his face, without the editing. "I'll see you Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he agreed. The doors closed. She stood in the elevator and breathed and thought, 6 days. 6 days, and then the gala, and then she didn't know. She genuinely didn't know what came after, what shape this took when it stepped outside the compressed, specific world of a contract and 2 months in a penthouse in Manhattan. But she thought about Dana saying, "Then find out." And she thought about Sophie's drawing, the third figure in yellow, unlabeled, standing beside the tall one, and the small one like she'd been placed there by someone who understood, at 7 years old, something about belonging that takes most adults decades. The elevator hit the lobby. She walked out into the night. 5 days. Then the gala. Then they'd see. She realized, somewhere between the lobby and the street, that she'd stopped arguing with herself. That was either wisdom or surrender, and she was too tired to figure out which. She caught a cab and watched the city move past the window and tried not to calculate anything. Not risk, not distance, not the very real and complicated fact that she was a woman with $19 in her savings account and a 6-year-old niece who needed new shoes. And he was Ethan Callaway. And those two facts had not changed, and were not going to change just because he'd looked at her like that. They hadn't changed. But her coffee arrived black without asking, and Sophie had put her in the drawing, and he'd said, "I haven't made me want this less," like it was simply, unambiguously true. The cab stopped at her hotel. She paid. She went upstairs. She set her bag on the bed, sat next to it, and let herself feel it, all of it. The fear and the want and the specific, terrifying hope of someone standing at the edge of something they can't see the bottom of. She sat with it for 3 minutes. Then she opened her laptop and checked the catering timeline for Saturday, because there were 5 days left and the gala was going to be perfect. Or as close to perfect as she could make it, which she'd decided a long time ago was enough. The 5 days before the gala moved the way time moves when you're simultaneously dreading and needing something to arrive. Too fast and too slow, each hour swollen with tasks, and underneath all of it, the steady low hum of something she hadn't named out loud to anyone except Dana, who didn't need it named. Thursday's meeting was professional. Completely professional. They reviewed the final program order, confirmed the auctioneer's arrival time, walked through the contingency plan for weather. The retractable covering could deploy in under 4 minutes. She'd timed it twice. And Ethan signed off on the catering menu with one adjustment, swapping the sea bass course for something his foundation director had flagged as a known allergy risk among 3 of the major donors. She hadn't known that. She wrote it down and felt briefly annoyed at herself for not having caught it, and then moved on because there was no time for self-criticism that didn't come with a solution attached. The only moment that wasn't professional was at the end, when she was putting on her coat in the doorway, and he said, quietly, "How are you?" And she understood that he wasn't asking about the gala. "I'm okay," she said, which was honest. She was okay. Not settled, not certain, but okay. "You?" "The same." She nodded. He nodded. She left. It wasn't awkward. That was the thing she noticed on the elevator down. It wasn't awkward the way she'd feared it might be. Whatever had shifted between them Wednesday night hadn't broken the working rhythm. It had just added something underneath it, a new register that ran parallel to everything else, and they were both, apparently, capable of holding both things at once. That said something. She wasn't sure yet what. Friday was setup day. She arrived at the penthouse at 7 in the morning with Priya, the lighting designer, and a catering crew of 12, and the next 10 hours were the specific organized chaos of an event taking shape, furniture arriving in pieces and leaving as arrangements, cables disappearing under flooring panels, the florist's team constructing centerpieces at a folding table they'd set up in the kitchen, while Ethan's regular chef stood to the side with the expression of a man watching strangers rearrange his living room. Ethan had taken Sophie to his office for the day, giving the crew space. He texted at noon, "How's it going?" She sent back a photo of the terrace in progress. The stage frame up, the lighting rigs beginning to take shape, the covering deployed above it all against a gray November sky. His response came in 20 seconds. Better than I pictured. She typed back, "Of course it is," then deleted the "of course" because it sounded like she was showing off, and sent just, "It'll be good." He sent back, "It'll be more than good." She pocketed her phone and went back to arguing with the tent company's lead installer about the load capacity of the eastern railing for the speaker placement, which was a more urgent problem than whatever warmth she was currently managing in her chest. By 6 in the evening, the terrace was transformed. She stood at the far end and looked at it. The tables set, the stage lit, the centerpieces installed, the whole skyline framed behind it like someone had specifically designed New York to serve as the backdrop for this particular event. The amber lighting was exactly right, warm without being dim, the kind of light that makes people look like the best versions of themselves. Priya came to stand beside her. "This is the best thing you've done," Priya said. Not flattery. Just an observation from someone who'd seen enough events to calibrate. "It's the best space I've worked with." "You made it a space." Priya looked at her. "There's a difference." Lily let herself have 30 seconds of feeling good about it. Then she pulled out her checklist and started the final walkthrough. Ethan came back with Sophie at 7, after the crew had packed up and the space was quiet. Sophie walked onto the terrace and stopped completely. She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The tables, the lights, the city beyond the glass railing. Her face had that particular quality of total absorption that children bring to things that genuinely impress them, the kind that hasn't yet learned to protect itself with cool. "Lily did this?" she said. "Lily did this," Ethan confirmed. He was looking at Lily when he said it. Sophie walked to the center of the terrace and stood very still, and Lily watched her and thought about a 7-year-old who'd spent weeks at New York Presbyterian and the foundation that funded places like it, and the fact that tomorrow night the people in this room would give money that mattered to children who needed it, and she felt the particular completeness of work that's connected to something real. "It's good," Sophie said finally. Coming from Sophie, who did not give compliments for their own sake, this was significant. "Thank you," Lily said. Sophie turned and looked at her with those direct dark eyes. "Are you going to be here tomorrow night?" "I'll be here all night. I'm running the event." "I mean—" Sophie stopped. Something moved across her small face, careful, the way children are careful when they're trying not to want too much. "Are you going to still be here, after?" The question had more weight than its 7 words. Lily crouched down so they were eye level. "I'm here right now," she said. "That's real." Sophie looked at her for a moment, nodded once, with the resolution of someone accepting an incomplete answer because it's the honest one. Then she went inside to show Ethan the centerpiece she'd decided she liked best. Lily stood on the terrace alone for a minute. The city hummed below. November wind came in cold at the edges of the covering. She thought, "I'm here right now." She'd meant it as comfort. She understood standing there that it was also a problem, that she was here, that she'd been here in all the ways that mattered, and in approximately 36 hours the contract ended and the here would stop. She didn't have an answer for that yet. She went inside. Ethan was in the kitchen pouring Sophie a glass of water and listening to a detailed explanation of why the centerpiece with the white flowers was superior to the one with the greenery. He looked up when Lily came in, and the look lasted about 2 seconds, but it was the kind of 2 seconds that carries a lot of information. "Are you staying for dinner?" Sophie asked Lily. "I should get back," Lily said. "Early morning tomorrow." "We're having pasta," Sophie said, as if this resolved the argument. Lily looked at Ethan. He lifted a shoulder, a very small gesture that said, "I'm not lobbying for anything, but she's not wrong about the pasta." "Fine," Lily said. 15 minutes. She stayed 2 hours. They ate at the kitchen island, Sophie talking through her volcano unit, which had progressed to something involving plate tectonics, and Lily asking questions she was genuinely interested in, and Ethan mostly listening with his elbows on the counter and the expression of a man who knows he's watching something good and is trying not to stare too directly at it in case it stops. After, Sophie fell asleep on the couch with the television on low, and Ethan carried her to bed the way parents carry sleeping children, slightly awkwardly, with the practiced care of someone who's done it hundreds of times and knows exactly where the weight falls. Lily waited in the kitchen, pretending to look at her phone. When he came back, the penthouse was quiet. She'll be disappointed if the pasta isn't the reason you stayed, he said. It was very good pasta. Tell me that again when you meet Marco, because he's been insisting this household needs a proper dinner schedule for 2 years, and it would make his day. Who's Marco? The chef you had to relocate to the kitchen island today. He looked at the florist team like they were personally offending him. They were using his prep surfaces. Ethan leaned against the counter. He's very particular about surfaces. She laughed. A real one, the unguarded kind. He watched it happen with the particular stillness of someone cataloging something they want to remember. I should go, she said. You keep saying that. And then I stay for pasta. And then you stay for pasta, he agreed. She picked up her bag. He walked her to the elevator. Same as always, same doorway, same corridor. Except this time he stopped her with a hand at her elbow, light and careful, and she turned. After tomorrow, he said. Yeah. I'd like there to be an after, an actual one. He said it plainly. Not performing certainty he didn't have. She could see the effort of honesty in it, the specific discomfort of a private man saying something he can't take back. I know the distance is real. I know there are approximately 40 complications I haven't fully worked out. I'm not asking you to have answers tonight. What are you asking? I'm asking if you want there to be an after. Just that. She held his gaze. The honest answer was yes. The answer had been yes for weeks. The question was always the complications, the distance, the $19 in savings versus his entire skyline, the fact that she'd come into his life through the wrong door and was leaving through a contract, and somewhere between those two things they'd become people who ate pasta and talked about plate tectonics and knew how the other person took their coffee. Yes, she said, I want there to be an after. Something in him settled, not relaxed. Ethan Calloway did not visibly relax, she'd noticed this, but settled, like a thing shifting into a position that held. Okay, he said, the complications are still real. I know. I'm not going to pretend they aren't because the lights look good and I like your daughter. I wouldn't want you to. He stepped back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. Don't remind me. She stepped into the elevator. He didn't say anything else. She watched him through the closing doors, standing in his doorway, his corridor, the life that was his and that she'd been moving through for 2 months without quite understanding how much of herself she'd left in it. The doors shut. She slept for 6 hours and woke up at 5:30 with a clear head and a list of things that needed doing by 9. She was at the penthouse by 7. The catering crew arrived at 8. The auctioneer, a compact kinetic man named Graham, who had the specific gift of making a room feel like it was his idea to be there, came at 9 and walked the space with the focused attention she'd been hoping for. He had notes, good notes. She liked him immediately. The sight lines from the back tables to the stage are slightly long, he said. If we angle the stage 15 degrees, already planned. She showed him the revised layout. We're also running 2 screens flanking the stage. You'll have eye contact with the entire room. He looked at the layout. You've done this before. A few times. You know what kills an auction? People who feel excluded from the front. They stop bidding because it feels like someone else's party. He tapped the screen placement. This fixes that. That's why it's there, he smiled. I think we're going to be fine. By noon, everything was in motion and she had 3 hours before guests arrived. She went to her hotel, showered, and stood in front of the mirror in her dress. Deep green, simple, the kind of dress that recedes into the background the way an event coordinator should. She looked at herself. She looked tired. She'd looked tired for 2 months, but underneath the tired was something else. A solidity she recognized as the feeling of having done work she was proud of. It wasn't loud. It was just there. She went back. The first guests arrived at 6. By 6:30, the terrace was half full, and by 7 it had crossed the threshold where a space stops being an arrangement of tables and people and becomes an event. That specific atmospheric shift that's partly the crowd and partly the lighting and partly something that can't be engineered, just hoped for. Lily was everywhere and nowhere the way she was always at events, at the corner of every problem before it became visible, moving through the edges of the room, watching the flow. She caught a server whose tray was listing before anything spilled. She found Graham and confirmed the auction order with 15 minutes to spare. She fielded a last-minute seating request from the foundation's board chair with the specific diplomacy of someone who has done this 1,000 times and knows that the request itself matters more than where the person sits. She didn't look for Ethan. She was aware of him the way you're aware of certain things, peripherally, constantly, without looking directly. He was in the center of the room, moving the way he always moved, deliberate, unhurried, the kind of presence that rooms orient around without being asked. She caught him once in her peripheral vision, deep in conversation with two board members, and once he was talking to Sophie, who was stationed near the entrance in a navy dress, holding a stack of programs with the ferocious responsibility of someone who has been given an important job and intends to honor it. Lily had made Sophie a small laminate badge. S. Calloway, Program Director. Sophie had examined it for a full 30 seconds before pinning it precisely to her dress. At 7:15, the live segment began. She'd spent 3 weeks working on this, the part that replaced the video presentation, the part that made people uncomfortable in the right way. The foundation director had found 3 families, a mother named Cora, whose daughter had gone through cardiac surgery at 7, a father named James, whose twin boys had been in the NICU for 11 weeks, and a 14-year-old named Destiny, who'd had a tumor removed 2 years ago and was standing at the microphone in a sequin top she'd clearly chosen herself, talking about being scared and then not being scared anymore, about the nurses who remembered her name and the playroom that made the hospital feel less like the worst place in the world. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real is happening. Lily stood at the back and watched and felt something press behind her sternum that she didn't try to stop. She'd stood in this room 100 times in her mind, planning it, adjusting it, rebuilding it when the venue burned. She'd measured it in logistics and timelines and vendor calls, but it was this, a 14-year-old in a sequin top talking about being scared, that made the whole thing matter. When Destiny sat down, the applause was the kind that takes a moment to start because people are still processing. The auction followed. Graham was exactly what she'd needed. He moved through the lots with a comedian's timing and a salesman's instincts, and he read the room the way she'd hoped, sensing when to accelerate and when to pause and let a bidding war breathe. The back tables were in it from the beginning, which almost never happened. She watched the numbers climb on the foundation's live counter. At 8:45, Ethan took the stage for the closing remarks. She'd heard him speak in professional settings, at the conference, at donor meetings, the specific modulated authority of a man who's learned to use his voice precisely. This was different. He stood at the microphone in his dark suit and looked at the room, and then he didn't give the speech she'd seen in the draft. He set the cards down. "I had remarks prepared on," he said. "I'm going to put them aside because I think they were mostly about telling you how important this work is, and you already know that. You've been sitting in this room for the last 2 hours, and you heard Destiny, and you don't need me to explain importance to you." A brief pause. "What I want to say is something smaller. A year ago, I was doing this from habit, not without meaning. The meaning has always been real, but from habit, the motion of something you've done long enough that you stop feeling the weight of it." The room was completely still. "Someone reminded me of the weight this year," he said. "Someone who walks into a room and immediately sees every part of it that isn't working, and then fixes it without announcing that she's fixing it." He paused. She also walked into the wrong hotel room one night in Chicago and didn't apologize for it nearly as much as she thought she did. Lily froze. There was a wave of laughter from the crowd. Warm, confused. The laughter of 400 people who don't know the story but recognize the shape of one. "What I mean to say," Ethan continued, "is that the best things that have happened to this foundation this year, the best things that have happened in my life this year, started with someone saying yes to a contract she had no reason to trust, and then doing the work so completely that I stopped being able to imagine the space without her in it." He was looking at the room, but she knew, the specific way you know without evidence, that he knew exactly where she was standing. "The foundation's goal was $2.3 million tonight," he said. "The current total is 2.6. The applause that followed was loud enough to feel it in the chest. Lily pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and looked at the ceiling for a moment. 2.6. She'd been tracking the counter, but not the total. She'd been too busy watching the flow of the room. $2.6 million for pediatric care. For Destiny and the twins and Cora's daughter and every other kid in some hospital somewhere who needed the room to feel less like the worst place in the world. She breathed. Then she put her hand down and went back to work, because the event wasn't over and there was a dessert service to coordinate. She found Sophie near the entrance at 9:30, sitting on a small chair that someone, she suspected Graham, who had correctly identified Sophie as a kindred spirit, had found for her. Her program stack was down to 3 copies. She was watching the room with the alert, evaluating attention of someone who has been paying close attention for hours and is not yet tired of it. "How many did you hand out?" Lily asked, sitting beside her. 112. Sophie said it precisely. 3 people took 2 each by accident, and I told them, but 2 of them kept the second one anyway. That happens. It shouldn't. Sophie considered this. They said thank you, at least. That counts for something. Sophie looked at the room, at the people, at the skyline beyond them, New York doing what it always did, enormous and indifferent and somehow, from up here, also beautiful. Lily. Yeah? Dad talked about you in his speech. He did. He was nervous before it, Sophie said. He does this thing when he's nervous. He rolls his left sleeve up and then down again. He did it 3 times backstage. Lily looked at this child. You were backstage? I wanted to see, said with the absolute reasonableness of someone who sees no flaw in this logic. He didn't know I was there. A pause. He kept looking at his cards and then putting them down. I thought he was going to read them, but he didn't. No, Lily said. He didn't. Because he meant what he said. Sophie looked at her with those level dark eyes. He always reads the cards when he doesn't mean it all the way. Lily looked at the room for a moment, at the table where Ethan was now shaking hands with the board chair, at the counter still glowing with the night's number. Sophie, she said, the figure in your drawing. Sophie looked at her. The unlabeled one. Yes, Sophie said. What were you going to call her? Sophie held Lily's gaze with the particular steadiness of a child who is also somehow ageless. I was waiting, she said, to see if she was going to stay. The simplicity of it went straight through Lily's sternum. She didn't trust her voice for a moment. She breathed through it. That's very patient of you. Dad says patience is knowing what you want and not making the universe hurry. Your dad says a lot of smart things. He says a lot of true things, Sophie corrected. They're not always smart. Sometimes they're just true. Lily nodded. At 10:15, the last guests began filtering out. The catering crew was clearing quietly, the lighting was dimmed to something warmer, and the terrace had moved into that post-event quiet that feels like the exhale after something long held. Lily did her final walkthrough, checked the vendor logs, confirmed the breakdown schedule with the crew chief, signed off on the catering close. Each task completed and set down, the long list finally running out of items. She was at the kitchen island with her binder, writing her post-event notes while the muscle memory was still fresh, when Ethan found her. The room was almost empty. Sophie was asleep on the couch again. She'd lasted until 10, which was better than either of them had expected. A few crew members were finishing up outside. The city pressed close through the windows. He sat down across from her and said nothing for a moment. 2.6, she said, without looking up from her notes. 2.6, he confirmed. Richard Harmon bid on 3 auction lots. He bid against himself on the second one, and I'm choosing not to tell him. She looked up. He was watching her with the expression that had stopped being managed. Just his face, just him. You talked about me in your speech, she said. I did. That wasn't in the prepared remarks. No. That was in front of 400 people. I'm aware of how many people were in the room. She set her pen down. Ethan, what was that? The truth, he said, which is what I said I was going to stop not saying. She looked at him. You planned that. I thought about it. That's the same as planning. Not entirely. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the counter, same as last night at dinner, same as every night they'd sat here working through the thing they were building. Lily, I meant every word. I know you did. That's what I'm... She stopped, pressed her fingers against the binder. That's a very public thing to do for someone you've known for 2 months. 11 weeks, he said, which I recognize sounds like I've been counting. Have you been counting? I remember when things start. He said it simply. It's a habit. I noticed when you stopped apologizing for having opinions in our meetings. I noticed when Sophie stopped using her full formal voice with you and started talking like she does when she's comfortable. I noticed. He stopped. I notice things. It's not romantic. It's just how I work. And you noticed all of those things. Yes. And then you stood up in front of 400 people and told them. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. That terrified you, she said. It wasn't a question, a pause. Somewhat, he said, which from Ethan Callaway was the equivalent of completely. She thought about him putting the cards down, about Sophie watching from backstage as he rolled his sleeve up and down, about the specific bravery of a private man choosing to be unmistakably visible. I have $19 in my savings account, she said. He blinked. What? Approximately, give or take. She held his gaze. I'm telling you that because you should know what you're... This isn't... She exhaled. I'm not in your world, Ethan. I work in it. Those are different things, and I need you to know that I know that, and I'm not confused about it. And whatever happens after tonight, Lily, his voice was quiet, I know who you are. You know what I can do? I know who you are. He said it again, more deliberately. I know you raised your niece when you didn't have to. I know you stayed at a job that didn't deserve you because it was stable, and stability mattered more than pride. I know you cried in the elevator in Chicago. Don't make that face. The concierge mentioned it weeks later, and He stopped. I know you stayed in my kitchen last night for 2 hours because Sophie asked you to, and you would have stayed whether I was here or not. She was very still. I know your savings account number is not relevant information, he said, and I also know you're bringing it up because you're scared. And I want you to know that I understand being scared, and that I'm asking anyway. What are you asking? He reached across the counter and put his hand over hers, the same way he had in the kitchen 3 days ago, steady and unhurried. I'm asking if you'll let me figure this out with you, he said. Not tonight, not all at once, just figure it out. The complications, the distance, all of it. A beat. With me. She looked at his hand on hers. She thought about the wrong hotel room, about the green light that opened the wrong door and led to a man watching her with calm, considering eyes, and the specific patience of someone who had already decided she was interesting before she'd said a word. She thought about 11 weeks of Tuesday and Thursday meetings that were really something else wearing professional clothes, about plate tectonics and volcano books, and pasta at the kitchen island, and a 7-year-old who put her in a picture and waited to see if she was going to stay. She thought about Dana saying, "Then find out." She turned her hand over and held his. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" "Figure it out with you." She met his eyes. "Okay." He looked at her with something that wasn't the almost smile and wasn't the managed stillness, just relief, honest and uncurated, the face of a man who has been waiting for something and is now, finally, holding it. Outside, the city did what it always did. New York in November, cold and enormous, and entirely uninterested in the small, significant things happening in its penthouses and its corridors and its wrong hotel rooms. It kept its noise and its light and its particular kind of indifference that somehow still felt, from up here, like permission. Sophie's voice came from the couch, small, half asleep, not quite awake. "Lily?" Lily turned. Sophie's eyes were barely open. She'd been asleep for an hour, presumably dreaming, and had surfaced just enough to check. "I'm here," Lily said. A pause. Sophie looked at her for a moment with the unfocused clarity of half sleep. "Okay," Sophie said, and went back to sleep. Lily turned back to Ethan. He was looking at her with the expression she now understood was what his face looked like when he was feeling something he didn't have words for. She understood it because she was wearing the same one. "Go put her properly to bed," Lily said quietly. He stood, went to Sophie, lifted her the way he always did. The practiced awkwardness, the careful hands. Sophie made a small sound and went limp against his shoulder. Lily watched them. She thought about drawings with unlabeled figures and the word waiting and the particular kind of patience that knows what it wants and doesn't make the universe hurry. She looked out at the city, $2.6 million. A terrace she'd built out of a disaster. A little girl who'd trusted her with the honest things. A man who'd put his cards down and told the truth in front of 400 people because he'd decided the truth mattered more than being careful. She thought, this is what the city looks like from up here. And she thought, I'd like to see it again. She flew back to Chicago on Sunday morning. Ethan had offered the car service. She'd taken it because she was tired enough that refusing felt like performance rather than principle, and she was done performing things. The car picked her up at 7, and she sat in the back with her binder in her lap and her shoes off and watched. New York moved past the windows in its gray November way, the streets still half empty, the sky the color of old dishwater, the city looking for once like a place where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, which she knew was a lie but appreciated anyway. She texted Ethan from the airport, 2.6. You should feel good about that. He replied in 4 minutes. We should. She looked at the word we for longer than was probably necessary. She boarded the plane. The flight home felt different from the flight out, which had been 47 minutes of trying to talk herself out of things she already knew. This one was quieter. Not resolved. She wasn't naive enough to call anything resolved. There were still approximately 40 complications he'd mentioned himself, and she'd been sober enough to count closer to 60. But settled, the way you feel after a decision that was hard to make and turns out to be the right one, or at least the honest one, which sometimes amounts to the same thing. Maya was at the apartment when she got home. She launched herself at Lily from the hallway in the specific full-body way of a 6-year-old who has been waiting for several hours and has no interest in playing it cool. You were gone so long, Maya said into her shoulder. 4 days. That's long. I know. Lily held her. She smelled like Dana's shampoo and something crayon-adjacent. I brought you something. Maya pulled back. The New York thing? The New York thing. It was a snow globe, but not the one she'd bought on the street 2 months ago. That one had been an impulse. This one was from a proper shop near the hotel, Manhattan skyline inside, and when you shook it, the snow fell in a way that was actually satisfying rather than immediately settling into a clump at the bottom. Maya shook it, watched the snow, shook it again. It's good, she pronounced. High praise. Dana was in the kitchen making coffee and pretending not to have watched the entire exchange. She handed Lily a mug when she came in and said nothing for a strategic moment. So, Dana said. So. The speech. Lily looked at her. How do you know about the speech? Because Priya, your audio coordinator, follows the Callaway Foundation on social media, and apparently someone filmed part of it. Dana picked up her own mug. It's had about 40,000 views since last night. Lily set her mug down. 40,000. The wrong hotel room thing is very popular in the comments. Dana looked at her with the expression she'd been refining for 15 years. The one that said, I knew this was going to happen. I'm not saying I told you so. I am absolutely saying I told you so. Are you okay? I don't know. Lily was honest. I think so, yes. She picked her mug back up. It's complicated. Is it the good kind of complicated? She thought about his hand on hers. Sophie asleep on the couch. Okay. The word we. Yeah, she said. I think it's the good kind. Dana nodded once, satisfied, and let it go. This was one of the things Lily loved most about her. She knew when to push and when to trust that the ground had been covered. The following Monday, Lily went into her office. She'd thought about this on the plane, not in a dramatic way, not with a grand gesture already scripted, but with the practical clarity of someone who has been given a correct view of their own situation and can't unsee it. Ethan had said, weeks ago, stop protecting them. She'd filed it and not forgotten it, the way she filed most things he said. She requested a meeting with Marcus Holt's supervisor, Shifroshti, not Marcus, his supervisor. And she sat in the chair across from a woman named Ellen Briggs, who ran the event management division and who had, Lily suspected, been watching Marcus's patterns for longer than she'd let on. I want to talk about attribution, Lily said. Not angry, not emotional, just factual. I have documentation going back 14 months. Ellen looked at her. I think we're overdue for this conversation. It took 40 minutes. Lily laid it out. The seating arrangement, the Morrison event, the spring conference, the consistent pattern of work that left her hands and arrived in meetings under Marcus's name. She wasn't performing injury, she was just precise. At the end, Ellen said, "What do you want from this?" "I want it to stop," Lily said. "And I want a title that matches what I actually do. If that's not possible here, I'd like to know now." She was promoted to senior event coordinator within the week. Marcus was moved laterally to a role with significantly less access to her work. She told Ethan on Thursday, not as a triumphant announcement, just in the course of a phone call that had become, somehow, a daily thing, the way certain habits form without announcement. He called in the evenings, usually after Sophie's bedtime. She talked while she made dinner or sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, the same position she'd been in months ago when she first admitted to herself that she was in trouble. "Good," he said when she told him about the promotion. Simple and direct. "It's a small thing." "It's not a small thing. You asked for what you were owed." A pause. "That's not small. Most people don't do it." "I had a conversation with a very annoying billionaire who told me to stop protecting people who didn't deserve it." "Very annoying," he said, and she could hear the shape of it. Not quite the almost smile, the real one. The one she'd watched evolve across 11 weeks until it stopped being guarded. "How's Sophie?" she asked. "She finished the volcano unit. She's now very invested in tectonic plates." She mentioned. She asked when you were coming back. Lily looked at the kitchen, at Maya's drawing on the refrigerator. A crayon figure labeled Maya and a taller one labeled Lily, and a third one that Maya, unprompted, had labeled Eaton's friend in the spelling of a 6-year-old who was confident, if not accurate. She hadn't pointed it out to anyone, but she knew it was there. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's an honest answer. I'm trying to give more of those." I noticed. A beat. "For what it's worth, I'd like the answer to become sooner." "I know you would. And I'm not trying to pressure—" "Ethan." She leaned her head back against the cabinet. "I know you're not. I know what this is." "What is it?" She thought about it. "It's two people who are both a little scared and decided to try anyway." A pause. "That's what it is?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "That's what it is." They talked for another hour, which was longer than either of them intended, and neither of them tried to end. The weeks that followed were not a fairy tale, which was fine with both of them, because fairy tales require a specific suspension of the laws of reality that neither Lily nor Ethan had much patience for. What they were instead was this: two people learning each other across distance, which is one of the stranger and more specific forms of intimacy available. The way you fill in the blanks differently when the person isn't in the room. The way conversation carries more weight when it has to substitute for presence. He flew to Chicago twice in November. The first time was a business trip that he extended by a day, and they had dinner at a restaurant she chose, in a neighborhood she knew, and she felt for the first time the small power of being on her own ground, the way a city becomes armor when you've lived in it long enough. He looked at the neighborhood with the attention he brought to everything, and she watched him look and thought, "This is who I am outside of a penthouse." She wanted to see if it changed anything. It didn't seem to. The second trip was not a business trip at all. He just came. And they walked through Lincoln Park in the cold and talked and got bad coffee from a cart near the water, and he met Maya. This was the part Lily had thought about most. Not him meeting her. She'd handled introductions before, but the specific weight of it, the fact that Maya was not peripheral. Maya was the reason Lily had taken the contract, the reason she'd been at that conference in the first place, the presence in her life that made every other decision smaller. Maya looked at Ethan with the frank appraisal she brought to most things. "You're the one Lily went to New York for." "That's right," Ethan said. "She brought me a snow globe." "I know. She told me." Maya considered this. "Are you nice to her?" Lily pressed her lips together. Ethan looked at Maya with the same seriousness he'd have brought to a board meeting. "I try to be. Dad says trying doesn't count. Doing counts. Your dad sounds smart." "He's okay," Maya said, which was the complex diplomatic answer of a 6-year-old who had opinions about her father that she wasn't prepared to share with a stranger. She looked at Ethan for another moment. Then she held out her snow globe. "You can shake it if you want." Ethan took it, shook it, watched the snow fall with genuine, unselfconscious attention. "That's satisfying," he said. "I know." Maya said, pleased. That was more or less the introduction. Lily had expected it to be harder or bigger or to require more. It turned out that a 6-year-old's requirements were simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Be real. Be present. Don't perform. He'd passed without trying, which she thought was probably the right result. She took Maya to New York in December. Not a big trip. 4 days, the weekend before Christmas. A hotel she paid for herself in a neighborhood that was neither glamorous nor depressing. Just a place with good light and a diner 2 blocks away that served pancakes Maya declared the best she'd ever had on the first bite. Sophie and Maya met on a Saturday afternoon in Central Park. Lily had wondered about this, had turned it over, the question of 2 small people being introduced with the weight of adult significance attached, the way children can feel when they're being asked to perform something. She needn't have worried. Sophie looked at Maya for approximately 5 seconds and said, "Do you know about plate tectonics?" Maya said, "No." Sophie said, "I'll tell you. It's very good." And that was that. They walked ahead, Sophie explaining the mechanics of tectonic movement to a 6-year-old who was absorbing it with genuine interest, and Lily and Ethan walked behind them in the cold and watched and didn't say anything for a long time. "Sophie doesn't talk to most kids like that," Ethan said. "Like what?" "Like they're capable of understanding things." He watched his daughter gesture emphatically about subduction zones. She decides pretty quickly whether someone's worth explaining things to. Maya's worth explaining things to. Apparently. He looked at Lily sideways. "Like someone else I know." She didn't answer that, but she felt it. They had dinner that night in a restaurant that was neither his world nor hers, but somewhere between, a corner place in the West Village with good food and noise enough that Sophie and Maya could talk without performing quiet, and Lily and Ethan could have a conversation that wasn't a phone call for the first time in 3 weeks. At one point, Maya fell asleep sitting up, which was a talent she'd had since infancy, and Sophie looked at her with the expression of someone encountering a new and interesting phenomenon. "She just went to sleep," Sophie said. "She does that," Lily confirmed. "In the middle of dinner." "In the middle of most things." Sophie looked at Maya with something that was mostly scientific interest and maybe, slightly, the beginning of affection for a small person who slept without warning and knew nothing of plate tectonics but had been willing to learn. Ethan carried Maya to the cab. Lily carried her up to the hotel room. Somewhere in the handoff, Maya woke up briefly, registered that she was being moved from one set of arms to another without incident, and went back to sleep. Lily put her in the bed and straightened up and found Ethan in the doorway. They stood in the corridor outside her hotel room. "I should," she started. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "We're getting better at finishing each other's sentences." "That happens." "It's been 3 months," she said. 3 months of phone calls and 2 visits and 1 very significant charity gala. And 11 weeks before that. "You counted again." "I told you, it's a habit." He looked at her. "Lily, what do you want? Not what's practical, not what makes sense. What do you actually want?" She looked at this man in a hotel corridor. Not his penthouse, not his office, not the polished context where she'd first understood who he was. Just a hallway with fluorescent lighting that was slightly too yellow and a fire extinguisher case on the wall and the sound of someone's television 2 rooms down. She thought about the wrong room, about the green light that was supposed to be red, the defective key card, the dark suite she'd walked into thinking it was hers. She'd spent months understanding that the mistake was actually the beginning of something, which was the kind of thing that sounded like a greeting card and turned out to be simply, stubbornly true. But she also thought about this. The wrong room worked because of what happened after it. Not the accident, but the decisions. His decision to sit down across from her in a hotel cafe. Her decision to take the contract. His decision to tell the truth in front of 400 people. Her decision to say, "Okay, figure it out with me." Accidents don't make love stories. People do. "I want what I said I wanted," she said. "To figure it out. With you." A pause. "But I also want to tell you that I'm done treating it like a provisional thing, like it might not work, so I should hold part of myself back in case it doesn't." She held his gaze. "I'm not built for provisional. I've tried it. It makes me worse at everything." He looked at her for a moment. "What does not provisional look like?" "It looks like me stopping apologizing for the complications and starting to solve them." She exhaled. The distance is real, but distance is a logistics problem, not a feelings problem. I'm good at logistics. The best I've ever seen, he said, without irony. I know Maya and Sophie are at different stages of trusting this. I know Sophie puts me in drawings, but that's not the same as a 7-year-old being ready for her world to change. I know that takes time, and it should take time. She pressed her back against the wall. I also know that I walked into the wrong hotel room in Chicago 6 months ago, and I have been, steadily, in the right place ever since. He crossed the corridor, stood in front of her. Same as always. Same height differential, same specific gravity of his presence. The thing she'd cataloged and stopped trying to uncatalog. Lily. His voice had that quality, the one that wasn't managed. Yeah, I love you. She held very still. He said it the way he said most honest things, directly, without performance. The way you state a fact you've been sitting with long enough that it stopped feeling scary and started feeling like just the truth. I've been trying to figure out when to say it, he continued. I kept thinking there would be a better time, a better context, and then I thought, that's the kind of thing I'd tell someone else not to do. Wait for perfect circumstances to say a real thing. She looked at him. I love you, she said. He blinked, the slightest fracture in the steadiness. I've known for a while, she said. I've just been careful. Careful, she agreed. And I'm done with careful as a way of not saying true things. Careful about the gala was good. Careful about my feelings. She shook her head. It was just expensive. He kissed her in the corridor with the yellow fluorescent light and the television 2 rooms down, and it was nothing like an event she'd planned, and nothing like a penthouse in Manhattan, and nothing like the wrong hotel suite in Chicago. It was just a hallway, just 2 people. It was enough. It was more than enough. They worked out the logistics over January and February the way Lily worked out most logistics, methodically, honestly, with a clear acknowledgement of the problems before attempting the solutions. The distance was the first thing. Chicago to New York was not insurmountable. It was a short flight or a long day, and they'd already been doing it. But doing it indefinitely as a permanent structure wasn't a life. It was an arrangement, and neither of them wanted an arrangement. She didn't move immediately. That was the first thing they agreed on. No dramatic gesture that bypassed the practical questions and created new problems. She had a job, a lease, a 6-year-old who was enrolled in school and attached to her teacher and her neighborhood. Maya's life didn't get restructured because 2 adults had reached a conclusion. What happened instead was slower and more real. Lily began building a client base in New York. Priya made introductions. The Callaway Foundation Gala was a credential that opened doors, and she had 3 consulting contracts signed by February and a 4th in discussion. She started looking at apartments in Brooklyn, in the neighborhood where her hotel had been in December, because she liked the light and the diner and the feeling of it. Not Ethan's building, not his world, hers, that would become connected to his. Ethan's assistant, Andrea, who Lily had come to understand was both hyper-competent and quietly invested in this outcome, helped her navigate the moving logistics with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything. Lily had thanked her once, and Andrea had said dryly, I've been with Mr. Callaway for 7 years. He's been better since September. I don't need thanks. I need this to continue. Lily had laughed for a solid 30 seconds. Maya's school situation was the piece that required the most care. Lily talked to her about it over several weeks, not as a decision already made, but as a conversation, which was how she'd always tried to talk to Maya, because a child who'd already had her world rearranged by loss deserved to feel like she had a hand in the arrangements. Would you want to live in New York? Lily asked. They were at the kitchen table on a Sunday, pancakes in progress, the specific domesticity of a Sunday morning that had been their constant for years. Maya thought about it with genuine seriousness. Would we still have pancakes? Obviously. Would I see Sophie? Probably a lot. Does Sophie's school have plate tectonics? I can find out. Maya shook the snow globe. She'd had a habit of shaking it while she thought since December. The snow fell. She watched it settle. Okay, she said. Just okay. I want a room with a window. Maya set the snow globe down. My room here doesn't have a good window. I'll find you a room with a window. A big one. A big one, Lily confirmed. Maya went back to watching the pancakes cook with the satisfaction of someone who has negotiated successfully. The move happened in April, not the clean cinematic version where everything fits in boxes and the new city opens its arms. The actual version, which involved a moving company that was 2 hours late in a box labeled kitchen that somehow contained 3 books, a lamp, and one of Maya's shoes. Lily spent the first night in the new apartment eating takeout on the floor because the table was still somewhere in the hallway, and Maya fell asleep against her shoulder, and she looked at the bare walls and the boxes and thought, this is what starting over looks like from the inside. It wasn't beautiful, but it was real, and it was hers. Sophie came to see the apartment 2 days after the move, with the evaluating eye she brought to everything. She walked each room slowly, asked practical questions about the window in Maya's bedroom and the layout of the kitchen, and finally stood in the living room with her hands on her hips. It needs things on the walls, she said. We just moved in. Still, she looked at Lily. Maya said her window is big. She asked for a big window. Sophie considered this with the expression of someone recalibrating their assessment of a person they already thought well of. That was smart, she said. She has good taste. Like someone, Sophie said, and looked at her, and they both understood what she meant without the sentence needing to be finished. The 4 of them, Lily, Ethan, Sophie, Maya, were not a unit that had arrived at itself cleanly. There were days Sophie went quiet in a way that wasn't sullenness exactly, but was something close to grief, a missing that didn't go away just because something new had arrived. There were days Maya asked about her parents in the way she sometimes did, bluntly and without warning, and Lily answered as honestly as a person can answer questions that don't have satisfying answers. There were negotiations about space and schedules, about what dinner looked like when 2 very different children had very different ideas about what belonged on a plate. There was one afternoon in May when Sophie and Maya had an argument about something small that became about something large, the way children's arguments do. And both of them cried and neither of them would say why. And Lily and Ethan sat in the kitchen afterward and looked at each other with the particular exhaustion of people who are building something that doesn't come with instructions. Are we doing this right? She asked. Probably not entirely, he said. I'm not sure there's a right. Very reassuring. You want reassurance or you want honest? Both, she said. At the same time. He thought about it. Honest is, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this, and some of it is going to be wrong. Reassuring is, I'd rather be doing it wrong with you than doing it right with anyone else. She looked at him. That was actually pretty good. I've been working on it. How long? About 3 weeks. She laughed, the real kind. He smiled. Not the almost smile, not the managed one. His actual face. They were going to be okay, not because it was easy or fated or any of the things stories like to claim about themselves, but because they were both showing up, and showing up imperfectly, and continuing anyway. That was the thing Lily understood now that she hadn't fully before. Love isn't the feeling. The feeling is just the beginning. Love is the decision you make at 7 in the morning when you're tired and someone needs something and you'd rather be asleep, and you do the thing anyway. It's the conversation you have instead of avoiding, the truth you say instead of the careful version, the room you choose to stay in. She'd walked into the wrong room. She'd built a life in it. One evening in June, the city warm now, spring having done its usual reluctant transition into something that finally felt like summer, Ethan took her and Sophie and Maya back to Chicago for a weekend trip. It was Sophie's idea, actually. She'd been curious about the city since Lily had talked about it, and Maya had described Lincoln Park in the specific terms of someone who had strong opinions about parks, and Sophie had decided she needed to investigate. They stayed at the Alderton Grand, same hotel, different rooms, adjacent ones, both on the 14th floor, well away from the 24th. On the second evening, after Sophie and Maya had been put to bed in the girls' room with the television on low and the negotiated compromise of one more episode of a nature documentary about deep-sea creatures, Lily and Ethan were in the corridor. He took her hand and they walked to the elevator, rode up to the 24th floor. She knew where they were going before he pressed the button, and she stood beside him in the elevator and didn't say anything. The hallway was identical to every other hallway in the building. Long, gold-lit, doors repeating in both directions. They stood in front of room 2416. She looked at it. The brass numbers. The card reader. The ordinary door that led to the first morning of everything. I think about that night sometimes, she said. What do you think? I think I was so tired I could barely see straight. She looked at the door. I think if I hadn't been that tired, I would have double-checked the number. If you double-checked the number, none of this. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment. I also think, I've thought about this a lot actually, the accident wasn't the thing. The accident just put us in the same room. Everything after that was a choice. He looked at her. You chose to sit down in the cafe, she said. I chose to take the contract. You chose to put the program cards down. I chose to turn my hand over. She met his eyes. The accident was a door. We're the ones who walked through it. He was quiet for a moment. That's true, he said. I know. She looked at the door one more time. I just wanted to say it, because the accident is going to be a story we tell. The wrong room, the defective key card, it's a good story. She turned to face him. But I want us to know that we did this, not a mistake. Us. He looked at her with the expression she'd stopped trying to catalog because it was just his face now. The one she knew, the real one, without any of the management. He pulled her in. She pressed her face against his jaw, same as she had the first night in his kitchen, and he held her in a hallway on the 24th floor of a Chicago hotel while the city did its indifferent luminous thing beyond the windows, and they stood there for a while. We should go back down, she said eventually. Sophie has strong opinions about what constitutes appropriate bedtime supervision. She has strong opinions about everything. She comes by it honestly. He made that sound. The short, genuine laugh she'd first heard months ago in his kitchen and had understood even then was rare. They walked back to the elevator. She pressed the button. The light came on. The doors slid open, gold and ordinary, the kind of elevator you ride without remembering you've ridden it. She stepped in. He stepped in. The doors closed. They went back down to their floor, back to the room where Maya was probably not asleep, and Sophie was definitely running commentary on the Deep Sea documentary. Back to the ordinary, complicated, imperfect evening of 2 adults and 2 children, and a life that had been built, carefully and messily, out of a wrong turn and a series of right ones. The elevator opened. They walked out. Behind them, the doors slid shut. Somewhere above them, on the 24th floor, room 2416 sat empty and unremarkable. Just a hotel room, just a door, the way all doors look before you understand what's on the other side of them. There's something that takes years to learn and can't really be taught, only arrived at, usually sideways, usually when you're too tired to be defensive about it. It goes like this. The life you're supposed to have is not waiting for you at the end of a plan. It's in the detour. It's in the moment you checked the wrong number and walked into the wrong room and were too exhausted to be anything other than exactly who you were. It's in the decision you made the next morning to be honest instead of managing the situation. And the one after that, and the one after that, Lily had spent years being careful. She'd been careful with her feelings, and careful with her trust, and careful with the version of herself she let people see, because careful had always felt like the responsible thing. Careful kept you from being hurt. Careful kept you in control of the terms. What careful had actually done was keep her small, not safe, small. The hurt she'd been avoiding was never as bad as the habit of avoiding it. The control was an illusion. The terms were always going to be renegotiated by something she hadn't planned for. The defective key card. The green light. She had walked into the wrong room. And every choice she had made since, the honest ones, the scared ones, the ones that cost her something she was glad to lose, had led her here. To a hallway in a hotel in her own city. To a man who remembered how she took her coffee and put his cards down when he meant what he was saying. To a 7-year-old who waited to see if she was going to stay, and a 6-year-old who negotiated for a big window and fell asleep in the middle of dinner and shook a snow globe when she needed to think. She hadn't planned any of it. She'd shown up for all of it. In the end, that was the whole story. That was enough.